Member Shelton, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay. We stand adjourned. All right, Councilman Taylor, we'll start here we'll start in 5 minutes. We'll start our council meeting.
Okay.
All right?
Don't go to sleep.
Yeah, there's like that.
Don't worry.
There's like that little thing.
Welcome everybody here to the American Fork City Council meeting on May 10th, the year 2022. The agenda has been posted and we will follow it as outlined. We will first, and I would like to say that we have one member that will be of the council that will be participating via electronic means. That's Councilmember Taylor, and he is out of state, but he can participate and vote tonight. I will start with the Pledge of Allegiance, after which Councilmember Shelton will offer an invocation, and then I will conduct the roll call. If you'd please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our Father in heaven, we're thankful for the opportunity we have to be gathered this evening, Father. We're thankful for the many freedoms and blessings that we enjoy here in this country. We're thankful, Father, for the opportunity that is ours to represent the wonderful people of American Fork. Father, we're thankful that we have the ability to have a democracy where we can be able to discuss, debate, and make decisions on how we can better the quality of life, safety, and wellness in the area. We pray, Father, that will be with us this evening. Help us to be able to contemplate and discuss and find solutions to issues and problems. We pray, Father, that will continue to see fit to pour blessings upon us, that we may be able to maintain a great community that honors those who protect such freedoms, as well as provides a great environment for our children to be able to be raised. And these things we ask and pray for in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Okay, I'll now conduct the roll call. Councilmember Hunter.
Here.
Councilmember Shelton.
Here.
Councilmember Barnes.
Here.
Councilmember Carroll. Councilmember Taylor.
Here.
Okay. We'll now move on to item number 2, and we have set aside some time for public comment. Anybody that would wish to address or bring up a concern to the mayor, the council, or key staff, we would have you come forward at this time. We would ask you to state your name and for the public record, and please keep your comments brief. And I'm going to start with one that was turned in with a sheet of paper. Christine Larson. We'll invite her to come forward first.
Thank you. I got a loud voice, so I really want the mic right there. Before I suggest my concern and some suggestions, I brought this for you guys to see. This young man was born in American Fork, April 16th, 2002. He passed away 2 weeks ago on your city streets in a fatal motorcycle accident. This kid had the most amazing life. He did everything. He welcomed everybody. Everybody loves him. His name is Braden Christensen. He is my youngest baby. And I grew up in American Fork for 20 years. But this is all I have left. This is what he was driving the night of the accident. 1973 Honda. This is all I have left of my son's life. And there's more pictures. I took just different angles. Now, I come to you guys because my concern is, how many more accidents are we going to have on that bridge? How many more lives are we going to lose on it due to whatever. I have no idea what happened. My greatest concern is no other parent should ever go through what I'm going through. And I live 4 hours away when I have a problem. And I've done some thinking in how to honor my son. And the only way I can honor him is to throw some suggestions out that have come to my mind. I've talked with UDOT, and their cameras do not record on that intersection, which kind of baffles me because it's an intersection. There should be like still shots, recording, something. And nobody's seen the accident, yet there was a black truck. Someone said there was a black truck, but there's nothing to prove it, nothing. But now I have to live without a son. So my suggestion is there any way you guys can maybe restructure that road to put in a motorcycle lane for their safety? Or if you guys could work with UDOT and make it so those cameras can record. Because now I have to spend the rest of my life wondering what happened. Did someone actually hurt my son? On accident, intentional? And I'm never gonna know. But I did bury him on Sunday.
Well, Mrs. Larson, what, I just, express my sincere condolences. I heard about this wreck, well, a lot of detail about it, but I heard that it was, and the pictures would verify that it was very violent for sure. So condolences from the mayor's office, and I think I can extend that from the rest of the council. As you talk to UDOT and as you have expressed that, we certainly have the ability to talk to them as well, and we will. We'll bring that up. I'm not aware of the cameras that they were in place, or if they're in place, they're not operational. That is their road. That is their bridge. That is totally a state-run operation right there. They maintain it. But I'm happy to advocate for the cameras if they're there. That's not a problem that you can get that from the mayor's office.
Yeah, his name is Eric Dawson, and he hasn't called me back.
Okay.
On Region 3 in Durham.
Sorry, we're just catching up. Did West Main
Yes.
overpass?
It's Pioneer Crossing area.
He was just leaving Hearts, got to the stoplight at the bottom of the hill. He did not even make it to the top of the hill. His body went up over the divider and his motorcycle went the other way.
Yeah. So certainly we can, advocate for that, for a camera. It's ultimately up to them. It's going to be something they will finance. It will be something they'll have to budget for. Doesn't seem like a big budget item, but I'm happy to bring that up with the director of Region 3. Okay.
If I could have your support, I'd appreciate it.
Okay. You do. You're welcome. Okay. Is there anybody else that would like to make public comment at this time? We'd have you come forward and please state your name, even though I know you. Go.
Newell Curtis. I've lived in American Fork for longer than most of you has even been alive. But I have a issue with pressurized irrigation, and I'd just like to get it on the record. I own 4 shares, and my daughter owns 4 more shares. And part of those shares, I use, I think it's 1.3 of my shares that I use to make my pressurized irrigation on my city bill 0. The other, basically 6 shares, is rented to the city, and the city pays for the taxes on it, which is basically nothing. But yet the city uses that water and charges other residents in the city big bucks. I was talking to one of my neighbors who lives right next door to me, and she said that because of the size of her lot, she says she's paying $200 a month for pressurized irrigation. If she had part of my shares, why, she could probably get it for 0. I can't even rent my unused shares that the city is using to let her get her price down. So the city's using my water for their purpose, in my opinion. You're just kind of saying, well, thanks a lot, but we're going to get some bucks out of it. And I realize that the city needs lots of bucks. But everything that I look at now, I'm worried a little bit about what happens. Okay, now then they're going to take and they're going to put a meter now on my property. And let's just use the example that you're going to tell me as soon as you put a meter on my property that I can have 10 gallon a month. A facetious number. But say I use 11 gallon of water on mine. I'm all for conserving as much as I possibly can, but I still, since I own the water, I want my garden growing. I want my lawn in the backyard growing. I want a good looking yard. Since I own it, it should be mine. Are you going to then say, hey, you used an extra gallon of water. Now, that's going to cost you $100 over, we're throwing out figures here that means nothing. But I don't have any answers. I've talked to people down at the city hall and they say, oh, call this one and call that one and call and leave a message. And I've called and I've left messages and there has been no return calls that I've received from anyone. I was up at the Public Works Department today and same situation. Nobody knows anything. And it's just an issue that I think we need to have some answers to at some point. Thank you.
Okay. Well, while you're there, Noel, David, who's the best person for Mr. Curtis to contact or just to talk to about this?
Well, his situation is much different than most residents. And so there is going to need to be a conversation with Ernie John, who is the ditch master for those irrigation shares, most likely. But definitely over in Public Works, probably Jay can help us out too.
Okay.
The other thought that I had on this, and I think I've got a few questions about, now that we're publicizing pressurized irrigation over the next 2 to 3 years, people that have water shares are saying, okay, how's that going to change for me? And my understanding is we don't know yet, because we haven't decided anything as a council yet, which I think that now that we're installing it, it's probably time to start having those conversations. I know we started saying that we probably need to do a study to see how that works and what's the best way for us to look at charging, and then probably come back and factor in what those shares mean. And I would be more supportive of a more economical, fair, balanced approach to where the city's not getting it for free, but we're charging for others. But I would be in favor of that because, like I said, I've had others contact me, and all I can say is, I don't know, we haven't had that discussion yet, but yet we're telling people we're gonna meter it. I think that raises anxiety in people. And so if we could try to be able to say, hey, we're studying it, have an answer by this fall, or look at it, I think that would be helpful.
I think that sounds very good, except for the fact that as old as I am, I'm not sure I'll be here this fall.
Hey, but you know what? No, we'll just use your water to water your grave. So
I already paid up there at the
Okay.
cemetery. I've got my plot ready.
well, you'll have the greenest plot around. Okay.
You just put grass on my wife's grave just within the last week. Thanks.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thanks, Noel. You know, on that, I'm kind of watching for some of the cities around us that have meters installed to start that conversation amongst themselves, and maybe we can learn a little bit off them. I'm thinking namely Alpine. I don't know if they've gone to any tiered structure, but they are completely metered. I know that they're looking to get a rebate, and the state has promised them some kind of financial component because they've already invested. So we'll watch for that.
And I think getting Bowen and Collins is probably who we need to have involved, just like we did our culinary study for, and look at, you know, how that works, future projects, built-in cost savings, all that stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anybody else that would like to make public comment? Okay. Seeing none, we will close the public comment period and we'll move on to the city administrator's report.
Mayor, I have nothing tonight to report. Thank you.
All right. Move on to council reports. Councilmember Hunter.
Mayor, I've just used my time just to thank those who have shared their thoughts in public comment. Appreciate that time. What a challenging time for you, and we while we don't understand what that feels like, hopefully can sympathize with you, and rest assured we'll do what we can. We don't have a whole lot of say. We're just a neighbor, really, but we definitely will do what we can to support you and honor your son. That's all I have, Mayor.
Okay. Councilmember Shelton?
The only thing to report is, kind of had that report during our work session where Reese was here and we referred to the increase in fees at North Point. So those will go into effect as of May 2nd, I believe it is, and it was $1 per ton increase. I think that's about a $13,000 estimated increase to the city. So I anticipate that's going to be a discussion over the next year as we continue to see inflation work its way through the system and hit different parts of different vendors and things that we use throughout the city and other agencies that are out there. Other than that, there's nothing else for me to report from our committees, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Barnes?
Two things, if I may, they're kind of related. As far as the VFW, the Veterans of Foreign Wars and the American Legion, both organizations are doing well. They're meeting in the Veterans Hall. They truly appreciate that hall. They love it, and they honor it, and they honor what it stands for, and they honor the relationship and appreciate the relationship with the city. They did a flag retirement ceremony a month ago or so. It was very successful, very well done. It was a very good activity where they retired some flags up at the amphitheater. They are gearing up for a fairly busy summer schedule because of parades and other things. We won't bring all of those up or anything, but just know that they are involved in those and they appreciate that. Chief, nobody else has mentioned it, so I guess I better, right? Or do you want to? Go ahead. Memorial Day program. What time do you send off that stupid alarm? 6 a.m. 6 a.m. The wake-up call will ring. You can go down to the fire station, support our fire personnel, and have a very wonderful pancake breakfast with, what, 3,000 or 4,000 of your closest friends? About that, isn't it? Yeah. It's a pretty good crowd. It's a good breakfast. I encourage people to go to that. And then after you get done with that, we will have a Memorial Day program, our traditional program. Will be held in the Tabernacle. Finally, it's back open, and we've got some good speakers, some good music lined up. AF Marching Band will be there. If you have not heard them play inside the Tabernacle, it's a whole different experience than on a football field, because they are just beating down on you. But it is a wonderful program, so we encourage people to go to that. That will start at 11 a.m. And as we do that, we appreciate and honor all the veterans and their service. There are some here tonight, and we recognize them, and everybody else has served and is serving now and protects us as a country and the freedoms that we enjoy. That's a long enough speech. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Carroll?
I have nothing to report tonight.
Okay. All right, Councilmember Taylor, we can hear you if you'd like to, if you have something to report.
The only thing that I would like to say is that when I get back to being in person for a live council meeting, I will always speak directly into my mic so that I can hear what everyone's saying who are watching on YouTube or is streaming, because there's just not much pickup. So I'm doing my best to listen, but I will make sure that I'm in my mic the next time.
Yeah. Did you hear Councilmember Hunter calling on you there?
As a rule, I don't listen to.
Okay. All right, for the mayor's report, I would just like to personally, publicly thank every resident and business in American Fork You know, I think it's everybody knows that we're under a very extreme drought condition and have been for a couple of years in particular, very, very hard. And so we have asked our residents not to water till May 1st, and they responded very well. In fact, they responded even from last year, which was, I think, a record year as far as water, I guess, water used, or you might even say water not used. But from last year, we saved 120 million gallons, and 564,000 gallons from last year, a 47% decrease. And so we appreciate your participation. We are going to be asking you all year to do everything that you can to conserve water. I don't know if we'll ever spill into the American Fork River this year. We didn't last year, and I don't see that will happen again this year. There are years that river is roaring. And in fact, we even have a flood mitigation plan. As we're planning for droughts, we're planning for floods. And so, but it won't happen this year. But thank you. I just find those numbers, I feel like our citizens really care, and we appreciate that. And that is the mayor's report. We'll now move on to the common consent agenda. It is comprised of the 4 items that are before you. Has there been any noted changes to the minutes, Terlin? Okay.
It's 6 items, is that what you're?
You know what, you're right.
It's missed.
I am 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4. So, yeah. So, 6 items that are before you.
Mayor, I would move to approve the common consent agenda.
Okay, I have a motion by Councilmember Carroll. Second by Councilmember Hunter. And I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Barnes.
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor.
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton.
Aye.
Councilmember Hunter.
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll.
Aye.
All right. Now move on to the action items. Is a review and action on the appointment to city boards and commissions. We need to have 5 members appointed to the Board of Adjustments. We have 3 before you tonight. We'll have 2 more on our next agenda. And I think we can do these all at once. It's one committee. I would review and action on appointment of Mike Privet. He is a reappointment. Reed Shelley, who is with us tonight, and Scott Williamson, all 3 to be appointed to the Board of Adjustments with those staggering terms so that they're not all up at the same time. Is there any questions or concerns on these 3 names? And if not, I would entertain a motion.
Are those terms ending December 31st of those years?
Correct.
That's
Yes.
kind of implied. I just
Yeah.
want to,
Sorry, it's
still there.
January 31st
2024?
of 2024.
That's what we agreed to.
Okay.
Yeah.
A week ago, Council.
Was 31st, so I just want to make sure we get it. Thank you.
Mayor, I'd move to approve the appointments to the Board of Adjustment.
Okay, I have a motion by Councilmember Taylor.
I'll go ahead and I'll second. And the Board of Adjustments, just a quick comment, has a big place in my heart. That's where I started my public service, was the Board of Adjustments. And when I joined, Mike was a member of that board. And so, gosh, I'd hate to even count up how many years Mike has been on there, and appreciate it. And Reed, I'm sure you'll enjoy it just as much as I did. And it's a great committee.
Okay. All right, I have a motion and a second, and I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Hunter.
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton.
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll.
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes.
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor.
Aye.
That board has not met for almost 3 years, so Mike's had a little bit of time off. Okay, item number 2, review and action on an ordinance approving the disbursement of fiscal year 2021-2022 park tax funds. This is a carryover. We had a work session where we met with the park board, and they had applications, and they had vetted them and recommended them to, as we see it here tonight, to the city council for approval. So we can start off with any discussion that we might want to have concerning those recommendations. They are just that, recommendations. So,
I do have one point of discussion that I'd like to bring up, and that is the holiday event that was for the Harrington. I'm sure you received a email from the chamber detailing some of the things. I have been talking with the chamber about that for a number of years now, so it wasn't a surprise to me at the extent of what they are doing and what they have planned. And for me, it's too similar to what the Harrington is proposing, and I don't want to see the city supporting two identical events during the same identical period of time in the same identical place. So for me, I would like to keep supporting the group that we have already put in place and already has plans for that.
that meaning the chamber.
The chamber, yes.
Okay.
So are you saying totally take the money for Harrington, all of the money out?
Well, just for the holiday.
For
Just
that
not
event.
for everything
For
else.
that
Zero
event.
amount.
Yeah.
Couple of words, what
Yes.
the heck?
Yeah, just for that one event.
But remove all of it,
Yeah.
correct? Okay.
You know, giving this a little bit of thought, and I love what the chamber has done there, but I often go back and think about, okay, what's the fairest thing to do? Because there's tax dollars going to supplement the chamber as well, right? And so there's public funding that goes to the chamber to put on those events. There's public resources, being the police and the fire, that are there and help out with that event. And quite frankly, what I'd love to see, and I mentioned this last time, is both groups working together to really enhance what's there. I mean, from what Josh had written and from what I read in the packet from the presentation of the grant from the Harrington, it seemed to be that there are some similarities but also some differences that are there, and I think that could really enhance it. I'd much rather feel like the loyalty to me is to the resident of American Fork, since it's their tax dollars that are going, and I'd rather see us raise both ships and create a awesome event that really benefits the public, versus saying it's got to be one or the other. If we do say it's got to be one or the other, then I almost feel like we really ought to go into some kind of a, I wouldn't say bid, but some kind of an RFP for a proposal. We could say, okay, we got two groups that are willing to put it on there. Which one's the best for the residents of American Fork? Again, my first option would be, can we work together on this project? It's not the first time we've had a disagreement between the chamber and the Harrington, and so I'd hope that both groups would be able to come back together. So my thought was on that winter festival, make that funding contingent, with coming up with an agreement with the chamber, but also letting the chamber know that they got to come up with an agreement as well, so it's not just a one-sided way of doing things. And if they can't come to an agreement, then we go to an RFP process. But I don't know if we can come out, pick one group over the other.
And I look at it a little bit like, if I'm looking at taxpayer money, I don't feel like as a resident I want the city to support two holiday events, two separate holiday events, and putting taxpayer money towards both of them.
Totally agree. So what I'm saying is one event with both groups working together in collaboration that would be something that would be more impactful to the community at a whole. So that would be my recommendation, is trying to encourage that for the community. I feel like that collaboration, we could get a really neat event. And I love what Josh put in his email and the vision of the chamber, and I love what Harrington's looking at. I just don't know why we can't work together on it and not feel like it's us versus them, but instead it's for the residents of American Fork and how do we best benefit them.
Yeah, I've said my piece. I see it differently because I see that we're benefiting the residents better by not having two, but I understand your points and what you're making.
Mayor, I would concur with Councilwoman Carroll. I think, and I don't disagree with Councilman Shelton, but I think it's disingenuous to ask or encourage one group to put something on. They've done that. In fact, I was a part of the chamber when we started doing that. And we had Santa Claus in the park and began the downtown, come down Main Street and that kind of a thing with hot chocolate I agree. Let's encourage the chamber to reach out to Harrington and do that. But as far as funding it, I think we are funding it through the chamber in the ways that we're supporting them. And if those that are putting on that event want to reach out to the Harrington, they clearly have shown and had a propensity to be able to put on wonderful events and market well and do all those things, and great. If that's consistent with their approach on putting on that event, I think that's good advice. I don't know that I would tell them that's a requirement for the chamber putting that event on, but I don't see,
And one of the differences I saw, and maybe I read Josh's email wrong, or maybe you have more insight with that responsibility, Councilmember Carroll, is the time period. So the Chambers feels like it's more of a day event. It's kind of a come in, it's a night type event. You have the parade with Santa Claus, and it's kind of a day type thing. The proposal from the Chamber was kind of a week-long activity that would be happening. And so I love how the Chamber went out and is working with TAF and with the, I'm going to call it wrong, it's Wasatch Music Alliance, is that the right term to use? So I love that they are working in collaboration with other groups. I just look at this $13,000 and saying, how can we turn this into a really awesome event over a week? I think there's room there, but.
I'll just ask for Councilmember Taylor. You've been in these meetings, you're on that park advisory board. Do you have any feelings one way or the other? I just want to make sure, because it's kind of hard to just butt in on the phone, so we'll just leave it open if you have something to say. Councilman Taylor, you there? Could you? Okay.
You're able to see how the park committee felt by their recommendation there. I don't know whether there was much of a discussion in depth, talking about what has been done with the chamber. I would think that, I can't speak for that committee, and they're very well versed in all these things, but I would be in favor of, if there was some collaboration that could take place there. I would kind of bet park group committee would be along that same line, that if there was some way they could work together, that would be great. But if not, I know that the chamber, from my standpoint, has been working on this for a couple of years now, and I think it would be great to just have a wonderful holiday event at the same time. It doesn't make any sense to me to have two entities on the same date, same location, do that either. So I don't know if there's a member of the park committee there, but you can see where their recommendation was. So.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Any other feelings, Councilmember Barnes? Because let's just if I can just kind of close in on this item. Is there other items that you would like to discuss, or are we just trying to maybe think we're narrowing in on that one item?
I think it was you, Mayor, that said the park tax is both a blessing and a curse.
I don't think I ever said it as a curse, no.
Because now you've got money and people fight over it. If you don't have money, there's no money to fight over. And to some extent, that's coming to my mind. I don't think I have an extreme loyalty to one over the other. So I am neutral in that sense. Before we get too deep into this, remember, it is the Christmas season we're talking about. It's not Halloween. So,
You mean the Grinch?
no, not the Grinch, the good part of it. So I'm just kind of mixed on this as to how we do this. And this is going to get me in trouble, and that's okay, because I'm never going to run for this position again. This is not the first battle these two organizations have had, and I'm going to call a spade a spade. This is not the first time, and somehow we've got to work some of these things out. I don't know if Councilman Shelton's, this is my opinion, I don't know if Councilman Shelton's suggestion starts to do that. I think it does. So in that sense, I'm in favor of it. But I also recognize, yes, the chamber has been very involved for a number of years, and it's kind of a first dibs situation. So what I'm trying to say is I don't know what the answer is at all.
I'm gonna speak an
Thanks for
opinion,
clarifying.
but I don't have a vote on this, but I have watched and been a participant of this in the last several years. The chamber was gonna take this to a new level last year, and COVID was just in a place where it was very difficult. We were surging, distancing was still very prevalent. We couldn't have Santa Claus inside with kids on his knee and all that goes with that. They thought outside the box with the letter campaign. That letter to Santa thing was a huge hit in our city. And for sure with my grandkids, they just loved it. So I think that they have built it. There's been good momentum with the chamber, and they would like to continue. I would like to see what they could do. That's the mayor's opinion, so. I think that the chamber has good momentum, and I think that they go get private money as well, and have shown that. They'll get corporate sponsors. And so I feel like that's where I would, it's not a matter of loyalty, I just feel like it's theirs their first chair on this event, and they have been, and I think we should keep them there, so.
Just interesting when down there in St. George talking to another city, and they mentioned that they had a similar thing with a farmer's market. Came in, only one person wanted to do the farmer's market, approached the city, had it up and running for a few years, and all of a sudden they had 3 or 4 people coming in and asking for a farmer's market. In fact, there was an attorney I was talking to about it, and they mentioned that they felt like the best thing they had to do in that case, to be fair, is either ask them to work together or to put your best proposal forward. And I think that we have to be careful with just first one in the door gets the apple type of a thing. I was there on the chamber board when we started with Santa Claus at the library. Love what Josh and his group has done, and nothing against them. Same thing for the Harrington, but just looking at it very impartial. Gosh, wouldn't it be cool just to have both groups work together? And that's one thing I have heard from the Park Tax Committee over and over again, is how do we get groups within the city to work together and not so much against each other? And I'm not talking just these two, I'm talking, lots of times we've had that discussion. And so I'm hoping this is one of those opportunities where we can start seeing some collaboration come through. 'Cause at the end of the day, we can't forget who we're supposed to serve on this. And our loyalty is only to the residents of American Fork.
I just do want to point out that the chamber is collaborating with many entities to do this, so I think it's unfair to say that they're not. I just want to make sure that is.
And I did
put
point
in
out
the
that they
ground.
were collaborating with those
Yes.
organizations, right? I'm not saying that they're not, but what I do hope is that you now have a major organization that does have recommended funding to them, that this would be a great opportunity to work together.
All right, so let me if I could just peel back a little bit so we can get in, to push this over. Is there any other funding that has been recommended to us by the park tax that the council would like to discuss? And because if it's not, I think it would boil down to just whoever wants to make a motion and where a motion goes, but is there other things that need to be talked about? Because if that's the case, I think that we ought to talk about them, and then, because ultimately it's going to end up in a motion.
Right. So just, if we're tabling kind of that
Okay.
item to see where we line up at, then.
Okay.
One thing I'd like to bring up, and I brought up last time, is just the learning center at the library. I'd love to say, let's go ahead and fund it, but I'd love to put in, before we start spending those dollars, let's see if we can't come up with a more longer-term solution. And if we can't get any traction with a charter school or with school district or things of that nature, but I'd much rather work towards a longer-term solution, still approving the funding, and then if it doesn't happen, then the funding's there and they can still go for it. And that would help us meet our allocation requirement that we have to allocate the money. But I really do feel like if we're going to be spending the dollars, I want to make sure it's going to a long-term solution and not a short-term fix.
I might just speak to that. One of my assignments is working with the library, and these are matching dollars. And I think the improvements that we're talking about here are necessary for that space, or have, as have been mentioned earlier, they're things that could be transitioned to a new space in the event that that needed to happen or can happen. I don't disagree. Again, I hesitate to get too far in the weeds of managing versus governing, and in my opinion, that's a big concern with a lot of boards. We hire staff who are very capable of what they do. And in my opinion, Cassandria's group, probably across the board within the city, has the ability to take pennies and make dollars more than anywhere else. This is another example where they've found a matching donation, so we're going to get $40,000 worth of benefit to the library with a $19,700, I'm rounding, but $20,000 of investment through park funds is going to become $40,000 worth of investment in our city. And we already have a need there. I'm not suggesting that what you're proposing is a bad idea. I think it's a great idea. So again, with that suggestion that, yeah, Cassandra would love to have that conversation. She's more than willing, and their group, if anything, they would love to have that support. But I also don't think that that the need is no longer there for that funding that currently needs. These aren't things that, you know, they're last year's needs that need to be funded now, not next year's needs that need to be funded in a year, I guess is my point.
I get it. I guess I apologize. I didn't see anywhere where it talked about matching funds, so I apologize if I missed that. That does change the discussion a little bit, because I do like those matching funds coming in. I do look at it, though, and some of the stuff that I am seeing worries me about buying, smart boards and stuff like that. If we do partnership with the district, maybe they don't need that smart board anymore because they already have one at the district or something of that nature. But it's a smaller dollar item, and knowing that the match is there, I'm good with that. The only thing I would encourage is, again, I get the difference between managing and boards, but this board has seen this issue pop up for the last 10 years over and over again. And I think it's time that we communicate to management, find us a long-term solution, right? We know that space isn't going to be viable in the long term. So let's work towards that. And I don't know if that's happening with Cassandra, and talk about different things and brainstorm with them. So
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think short of some significant benefit in financial funding, I think they do what they can, but definitely I think they'd be all for having an addition onto the building, hypothetically, because it came up last meeting. But
Right.
yeah.
I think the next step, because there have been, they've looked at it, and they've looked at other property that's adjacent to the parking lot. We're talking a pretty big step financially for the literacy center. This will keep them going. I think it will boil down to needs, the needs of the city. We have a lot of needs. We have needs for sidewalks. We have needs for roads. We have a lot of needs. And so where does the literacy center fit in? I would say that they're probably about as efficient for what they do and what they ask for as any group, for sure, especially in the literacy center. Yeah, that's it changes lives down there. So, all right, let's do that. I hate to just keep tabling these, but I think these are all going to have to come up for motions.
Cumulative.
And so I better write them down. So I'm going to put on there the Christmas and the literacy center, and then we'll. Okay. Any other?
Just had a question come to mind, if I may go back. Now I've lost it. There's a certain amount of money that's in there for the Winter Festival. I want to say $13,900 or whatever. 13.2. Okay, that was close. What happens to the money if we don't allow them to do that program? Does Harrington get that money to spread over other programs, or does it come out of the budget? and have to be reallocated back into the budget, and then be reallocated. Does that make sense?
It does. So if the money is not spent on that project, it would have to come back into the pot to be reallocated out elsewhere, unless council dictated differently at the outset.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I figured, but I just thought that ought to be on the table. Sorry.
Okay. All right, is there any others, applicants, allocations that have been recommended that you'd like to talk about at the council?
So another one I wanted to bring up is on the Thibodeau's Arts Foundation under the administration portion. I know we've talked about this over the years, and we've talked about matching funds to try to get that to where it needs to be at. I would love, and Clark, I hope you can hear me. I hope I'm speaking clearly into the microphone here as much as I can. But I would love to see if the committee over the next year could talk about where administrative costs should be, and maybe we set a policy as a council. What my biggest thing is I think when the residents vote for this, they're thinking of the kid in the youth choir singing that's benefiting from this and things of that nature. And of course, you've got to have some administrative overhead to be able to put that together and have that happen. But as I look at it, I think that there ought to be some rule of thumb as to some kind of a cap on resources for administrative costs. And Newell was here talking about water, so the analogy that came to mind is flood irrigating with my grandpa and talking about water getting to the end of the furrow, right? And I guess that's my biggest thing, is making sure that water doesn't get soaked up before it makes it all the way down to the individual and to the programming. So as I went through and took a look at it, I appreciated the detail that was there, and each program has listed and allocated a administrative portion to it, and then on top of that, there's an administration grant request for the $89,000. I don't see the need for that $89,000. That's something I feel like they ought to go out and fundraise for and find other ways to have that. The other charities I work with, I think, some of the programming administrative costs are about $7,000. I think that's a great dollar amount to be at. It's in line with other groups that we're awarding. But then to do an additional $89,000 on top of that, I just feel like that $89,000 could be water used to get further down the furrow to help more programming somewhere else.
Question, if I may. I saw the administration numbers in each of the programs, and I apologize, I didn't print it out. I can't find anything on a computer. Those of you who know me know that. So if I don't have it printed, I can't tell for sure what it is. But it seemed like it was like $7,000 per program for administration, and it wasn't on all of them. It wasn't, for example, on the Mary Kamakami speech contest. Okay, we used that one. But I think I saw like 5 $7,000 amounts. 5 times 7, 35, right? And if we add that to 89, 14, carry 124,000 or something like that, which to me is a big number. I'm a poor boy, I understand there are large numbers. I think that's a large number going to administration. I'm not saying you're not doing a lot of things and a lot of programs, but again, I'm kind of agreeing, I think, with Council Member Shelton. The money's supposed to be used for the benefit of the participants and the cities, and I am a little concerned about high administration costs overall in total. I've talked to people in some of the other programs. They have administration costs, and I know they do. Theirs are not as high as these. They're different programs. We're not doing apples to apples. I understand that, but I'm just expressing my concern that there's a lot of administration in this program.
All right.
Mayor, would it be appropriate to have, you tell me, would it be appropriate to have Reggie explain the administrative cost?
I think it would, Reggie, if you wouldn't mind.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak. So if you have either on the computer or printed out the administrative budget that made the request for the 89,000. You'll see there that our total budget is 255,000 for the year for administrative costs to run Timpanogos Arts Foundation. And for the size of organization that we are, we're a pretty big arts organization for a mid-sized city. And at the same time, I think we do a lot to make a huge contribution to the arts in the city. I would also mention that at the time that the city divested TAF, I believe the budget was about 220,000 for TAF, or for the Arts Council at the time, and that was what, 10 years ago. So we're still, as our total budget that we're requesting from the city, not much higher than that, honestly, if you look at 10 years with inflation and everything else, and inflation's over the moon right now. So I'd like you to consider that I think we're doing really well. As I also presented in my last presentation, we have been doing a lot of fundraising. We've raised quite a bit in grants. It is our goal to continue to build on that and reduce our dependency on the park tax. That's been our goal since day one, and the city's been encouraging us to do that, and that's what we've been working for. And if you'll notice, there was concerns with the salaries, so we allocated the request that we're making to other costs and not to salary cost. So no salaries are covered in the 89,000 that we're requesting from the city. And as you'll see there, that on that administrative budget, the income there, the 43,000 is what we're showing for the program contribution, and that is separate from all of the other costs. In other words, we have a pretty big budget.
So, Reggie, walk me through this a little bit on the budget. I got it here in front of me.
Sure.
First one that has concerns to me as a council member
Mm-hmm.
is we look at the fundraising line item on the revenue or income side. Sorry. In my world, income is revenue minus expenses, not. Anyway, so revenue is 10,000, right?
On sponsorships, fundraising.
Okay.
Correct.
Now I go under expenses and I go to fundraising,
Mm-hmm.
and we're going to spend 12,000 to raise 10,000.
Right.
That doesn't make good financial.
So we actually have changed our plan since we made this request in terms of that budget item. We're no longer working with a consulting firm. They've gotten us up to where we can work on it ourselves. So that 12,000 is zero now.
Okay. That's better to know.
Yeah.
But you can see where I'm concerned.
Absolutely.
Saying we're spending
That's
12,000
gone
to
to
get 10,
zero.
that doesn't make a lot of financial
Right,
sense.
and we were being very conservative with the 10,000 because we're still getting companies, the big foundations who are saying, the pandemic's over, but there's still a lot of need out there, and we're still helping humanitarian and health crises. We're still not getting back to the arts and other types of things we used to fund.
Sure.
So that's why we put such a low number.
Now, help me understand, none of the park tax go into salaries, because when I take a look and say the program allocation is 43,000,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
We take 43,000 minus 115. What does
Okay.
that take us to? I'm gonna say 70 to 75,000,
Yeah,
but your expenses are 255.
right,
And if we minus out the salaries, that takes us to 155.
right.
So I guess I'm kind of concerned that doesn't make apples to apples, because you're
So-
asking for,
Well, right, so administrative is overhead. In other words, if I'm understanding your question, administrative isn't working to, a lot of our income that covers those other costs that we're not even asking for, how do we cover that budget each year? It's from our other revenue, other TAF revenue.
sure, I get
Right?
that. And your other TAF revenue is 70,000,
Right?
but your salaries is 110,000.
Our other TAF revenue is 70?
So if we go into your administration budget.
Right,
And again, we pull out the 43,000 for programming,
right.
that takes us down to 70 to 75,000.
Of non-program revenue.
I understand that.
Okay,
Okay, because your other program revenue is being caught up in those individual budgets.
Right.
And they're being expensed out to directors and other things of that nature.
Right, but we still receive revenue from those budgets that adds to the bottom line.
I guess I look at it as if you guys are the parent company
Right,
and their subsidiaries underneath, correct?
right,
Each of those subsidiaries are self-containing. And so you're charging them $7,000, it's coming back up for administration. The revenue portion of that's already in a balanced budget allocated inside there, so there's no revenue going up to you because it's being allocated to other items. That's how I see the grant being submitted as. So as each grant's being submitted, you've submitted separate ones. So let's just take instrumental, for example.
right.
You've said, hey, here's the income, here's the shortfall, here's what we need. We can't take that same income and now say, well, now we're going to not only pay for those expenses, but now double count towards helping to pay for administration salaries. So when I look at the budget that's been submitted, you've got 70,000 of non-park tax funds that you're
Right.
getting from the Valentine Theater, donations, fundraising,
Right.
Arts Center income, and Arts Festival income. I don't understand the statement that no park tax money will be going to salaries because those numbers don't equate. You're still about $30,000 shy of just even hitting your salary numbers.
So if our total budget's 255 and we cover those costs each year from total revenue of all of TAF, then it's,
It doesn't make fun of, you can't double count the revenue.
we're not double counting. So I get what you're saying. So here's my bottom line is that with TAF, this has been the same issue from day one, is that, and we've had this discussion many times, is that starting with what we had to start off with, I use the analogy, the old analogy of we're always changing the tire while the bus is going down the freeway. We don't have time to stop. We've got 7 programs. At one point we had 9, and we're trying to get, we're not a startup. We never were a startup where we raise funds and then had a budget and had everything in place and started doing our thing, working from our budget and running like a company would normally do. We started with a huge deficit in terms of we had the overhead to operate these organizations and yet no income at the level that it was needed in order to manage them like a normal business manages its overhead. And so that's what we've been trying to do to catch up to. My goal is to ideally not depend on the park tax whatsoever, get to a point where we're not dependent on any organization to a degree that we're in trouble if we don't have their revenue. That's my goal, has been since I joined on. So the point is what we're still at, we're getting closer, but we're not to the point where we can just say, hey, we can do this without the city's help. We just can't. And so that's where we are. And so if we're not showing the numbers accurately, I think we are, or appropriately, it's all right there. We've given you our entire budget in the past, every dime we've spent, so that you know where it goes. And so I'm just not sure what else we can do. And so, and my attitude is we are working as hard as we can to be a community arts organization for the city of American Fork. We feel like we've done a fabulous job, and with what we've had to work with, and it is what it is. So, and if you guys vote to take out the 89,000, we'll see what we can do without it, I guess. But my point is that there's no waste. We have 2 full-time employees and everybody else is mostly volunteer. I mean, I feel like we're doing a lot of things on a huge scale, relatively speaking, with a very small budget. And so it is what it is. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah.
I honestly feel like I look at other organizations and like Councilman Barnes mentioned, we're not apples to apples to anybody. We have 7 programs. I had a fellow tell me Well, I helped run an organization. I said, what was it? It happened to be the TSO, Timpanogos Symphony Orchestra. And I said, well, I have 7 TSOs to run. And, you know, we put on over 20 events a year, 20 events per year for the citizens of American Fork. About 20,000 volunteer hours. We have countless volunteers. We make a huge impact on this community. Huge impact on the community. So,
I guess where I'm coming from, and kind of go back to it, the original split, it was 50,000 that we gave.
mhm.
And then kind of came back and said, hey, we couldn't do it at 50,000, we need some more money, and so we allocated some more out of the general fund. And then just a few years later is when we passed the park tax to be able to go through and help out with this funding. At that time, there was only one part-time person for administration that was there, and a lot of the directors were volunteer and not paid at that point. I feel like we've gone a long way to help out with that, and I understand when you say, hey, you got 7 programs to run, but as I look at it, we've got some great compensation built in here to help out with resources that we're not talking about taking away. For instance, on the theater, we're talking $43,000 a year just to have other paid help to run that theater program that we're not talking about. In addition to that,
Well, just if I may say, we follow the model that community theaters all over the country follow, which is in most volunteer or community theater groups, you don't pay staff, but you do pay the crew. You don't pay the cast. The cast gets paid nothing. I don't think that's right. I've been an actor before in many plays. But it's tradition in America that in community theater, the cast doesn't get paid a dime, but the crew does get paid something.
Sure.
So we pay them a little bit. So that's why the community theater numbers are different than what you would see in some of the other programs. It's
Sure.
just the traditions of community theater in America.
but I guess what I'm saying is I'm okay with those. So I'm
Right.
okay with providing support to help run those.
Mhm.
In addition to that 89,000, we're already saying, hey, here's a 43,000 to help with administrative costs. I just feel the 89,000 on top of the 43, on top of the other salaries or benefits that we're offering out there that were built into the individual budgets, I just feel like the 89,000 is too much at that point.
So what I would prefer, if I may, recommend that you go out and look at comparable arts organizations the size of TAF, and then say is their overhead, and where does TAF compare there with their overhead, and say, is TAF high, low, or right, spot on, and then say TAF is high based upon our research of other comparable apples-to-apples arts organizations, then say we're too high. But to me, to approach it from that direction is, you can do that, but to me, it's not. It doesn't address the need.
You know, can I just interject here, just for a second? I guess for the interest, I'm
Sure.
always, it's time, but I'm not trying to rush this meeting along. It's 8 o'clock. I'll stay till 10:30, whatever it takes. But this conversation seems to be one-on-one. And I'm just
Sure.
wanting to make sure, I guess I just want to see if the council would like to hear this conversation out. Are we learning together? Or is it something that you feel like you just want to move forward on this one? Again, I'll add it to the list or I'll take it off the list. I'm just trying to get a consensus because this just feels like maybe we should have talked before this thing started, the two of you. So, Councilman Taylor, did you want to say something?
I just know that, again, the park committee went over this, we looked at the administration fund very closely, tried to, be aware and make those comparisons to an organization size and staff, and that is the number that the council committee came up with and passed along to the council. So that from their best research and all the discussions that we had, that was their finding to come forward at this time. I know that Reggie has, and I've commented on this to several of you. Reggie has worked very hard on the things that we talked about with bringing in grant money, raising monies from the outside. That is what we've asked to do. We've noticed a difference in there. I have not got into line by line on his books. where Councilman Shelton seems to have an additional degree of knowledge there. But from the standpoint of the committee, the recommendation was made to the city council that that $89,000 in the TAF grant was appropriate.
So, Mayor, if I could, I appreciate Councilman Shelton bringing this up. This is, Reggie and I spoke early on when I was put on the council, and I appreciate the time that you've given. I do feel there's a little bit of scrutiny in this organization, and rightfully so. There's a significant portion of the funding that goes to your organization.
You bet.
Sorry, I'm trying to make sure that I'm swallowing the microphone so everybody can hear me. But I genuinely, I mean that seriously, because you're under a microscope unlike many others.
Oh, from day one,
right?
We understand.
And we appreciate, I hope you understand that that's not an indication, certainly by Councilman Shelton, who clearly appreciates what you do, that there is any kind of concern that it's misappropriated.
Right.
For me, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, and I think I've shared this with you, part of my concern is that seems like a huge amount of money. I had two questions, Mayor, to your point of maybe just kind of hopefully coming to a point. I appreciate Councilman Taylor's comments about the park committee, and their recommendation is this. They've gone through this on a level that I certainly haven't, and I appreciate that. So I do take that seriously when they have that recommendation. Reggie, if I may, what does the admin cover then if it's not covering salaries? Just give me the kind of quick and dirty.
Do you have the sheet there?
I don't have it in front of me. I was listening to Councilman Councilman Shelton.
He's used to listening to me. So.
Yes, usually no, I'm just kidding.
Generally the expenses of events that TAF puts on that are not put on by any of the programs, equipment, repairs, maintenance of our facility, rent and utilities of our facility, and we have 3 cargo trailers. We have, equipment, marketing and advertising at the TAF level. Each group does their own marketing and advertising. We promote TAF as a whole, and we promote our events. We had the fundraising budget that Councilman Shelton mentioned. Just general supplies, insurance.
Right. And
general overhead.
I asked that almost not facetious, whatever, just to get it on the record so that everyone can understand those are the things that are included that are not, or that are outside the scope of salaries, of paid hourly wages.
Correct.
And so for me, I just want to make that clear that I am a little bit squinted eye. I've been very direct with you about that. And I appreciate your level of again, I think it's different. I think you're very open and transparent. I mean, you're providing financials to a level that I don't think we're maybe seeing everywhere. I don't know if the city's turning over their financials to determine where the parks funds are going in the park, but it's a little harder to see that. My point is, it's a lot easier to see a playground that gets put in than it is to see admin for the Arts Foundation, Otis Arts Foundation. And so it's going to be something that I'm going to want to watch, that I think it's appropriate. It's a significant amount of money. And admin, to me, if we could take that and bring it down, I would love to continue to see you guys not increase it from 50,000 if that number's accurate. I wasn't on the council at the time, but if that's in fact accurate and we've grown it from 50 to 90, that's the wrong direction in my mind. Let's help you. Let's work with organizations. Maybe this is one of those things Councilman Shelton talked about earlier about working with the chamber and being able to say, man, can we get the chamber to be able to sponsor some of the arts organizations in the city and be able to drive, sponsorships as part of their membership? I don't know. I'm totally spitballing here, but for me, I want to see it. I want to be able to say, hey, we're back to 9 programs, and we're also cutting out, or we're still giving you the same amount of money, but instead of at $90,000 going to admin costs, we've got that down to 40 this year, and we added 2 programs. Fantastic. Those are the kinds of things that I love to see. I appreciate that. I'm not suggesting that we diminish that this year, but it is something that I think is absolutely worthy of watching.
Okay.
So thank you.
Thank you.
And I
Lou?
just want to add, I was kind of looking at the list of different things that you cover. And just with, to me, there's 3 things that is indisputably helping all of the other groups underneath you, and that is the rents and utilities that you pay for the buildings that they all use, and the insurance that they all use, as well as the bookkeeping they all use. Just right there, that is 73,000. So I think there is some justification for a chunk that isn't salary. That's kind of really my point that I'm making.
And I guess where I come back then, are we okay going back to the original conversation Reggie and I had, and do we just put a stipulation in there that none of the park tax funds can be used for administration salary? I'd be okay with that. I don't know how you'll make it work based on the budget you submitted, but if that's what we want to go with. And again, my view
I'm
is that
totally fine with that.
that
Yeah.
89,000, I would rather have getting down to the participant level and growing it. And I would love for your sponsorships to grow, and that's where it's incumbent upon you as the director. I mean, that's your number one responsibility, right?
Right,
is
and so
fundraising.
we got the grant program going. The consulting firm that was working with us has helped us set up and create. We just created marketing brochures. We're working with 2 other consultants who are free, which is always nice. And so you'll be seeing us kick off a very large-scale sponsorship program. So our goal is to have grant writing, sponsorships, full sponsorship program, and also major donors. We're looking at planned giving. We're looking at everything we can do to have a multifaceted income revenue stream coming into TAF.
And I think this is a very important topic, because you are the only organization asking for just straight overhead, right? Just straight administration costs.
I think did we require that of you? At one point, I think we required that of them. We might want to consider requiring that of the other major groups.
I guess when we talked about it
So
back,
you're saying, sorry if I can, if I understood you correctly, of them spelling out that these are administrative
Yeah.
costs.
I think at
Okay.
one point
I just want to make sure I understood what your
Yeah.
question or
I
comment
believe
was.
it is in the line item of each request they put in the administration, but typically every request is for some kind of an event or some kind of a performance or something of that nature.
But there's an admin cost baked in.
Correct, and they have to allocate it out. When we got together in October and said, hey, what would we rather change? I brought up and said, I would rather have every park application come in and show that it's going towards events. I don't think there should just be an application for just administrative costs.
Well, I mean, he could bake all of that into
Correct.
each one. So if you wanted it allocated that way, but we specifically asked to have it allocated the other way.
Well, I don't know if we did specifically allocate, because Ann said right here in the handbook, and she pointed it to me right in that meeting, and it said it had to be and specify an event. So I'm not quite sure how this made it through quite, based on that conversation back in October. But it would be good to know where that's coming from. And that's my point that I brought up in the beginning, is I would love for the committee to come back and look at administrative costs. Is that something we're worried about? Do we feel like administrative costs should be capped at a certain amount that we want to have them come back and look at for next year? Now, I know that's a question that's probably outside the purview of tonight, but this is a discussion we've all had for years. And every time we come to it, I don't find it to be any easier than the time before. And I would love for us to be able to say, let's cap. I mean, in the past, we said, okay, it's got to be matching. Somehow we got away from the matching side of it, right? So I just want to have something down that's a standard that's fair to Reggie and to his group to say, okay, you're going to submit it. As one council member, I want that going more to programming. So go out, do your fundraising, do your grant process, work with your consultants, and have that towards admin. But for the park tax dollars, and when I think people vote for it, I feel like they're more for the programming than they are for the administrative.
So if we say no salaries, which I think has some merit in my mind, I would like that to be across the board for other organizations.
I would agree.
So I think there's 2 things. We have one that's, and this is just how they submitted their park application, right? You have an administrative component built into each application. And that adds up to 43. In addition to that 43, they've come and asked for additional 89 to make up for that.
I would just make the distinction, we used to do it the other way, and it was the city council that asked us to break it up some and let the groups cover some of, showing that the groups are covering their costs. So the reason we're doing it the way we are today, I don't remember which council member brought it up, but we're doing it based on city council request.
Sure. So I
We're
guess
happy to do it either way.
I guess what I'm saying is, I see it as being apples to apples, because I look at other organizations, they've already baked that in, and they're anywhere between 2,500 to 10,000 per event for administrative costs, right? Reggie's is anywhere between 500 to 7,000.
Yeah, but absolutely not. If we're making a rule that it can't go towards salaries, it absolutely has to be
So I'm just saying
the
that
same.
89,000.
I don't care the dollar amount or how much it is per, it's just you have to say, if it's a rule like that or a directive like that, I think it needs to be across the
So the
board.
only thing I'm saying no salaries on is on the administrative request for 89,000.
No, that doesn't make sense to me. If you say no salary, it can't go towards salaries, then it has to be
So
for
the
everything.
43,000 that they allocate could go to salaries, what I'm saying. That way it does keep it the same across the board, that everyone's kind of treated the same. And then we come back next year with some kind of a policy saying this is how much we believe administrative should be capped at. But if you want to go no across the board, we could go no across the board as well. I don't know what impact that would have upon every organization.
Well, if we're trying to get to the point that you've been making about this is supposed to get to the end of the row, quote unquote, then yes, that is the way it needs to be done.
I think it would be, I'll turn that up for, so if we do that tonight, oh, well, we can't do it tonight.
No,
Yeah, so I mean, I'm thinking,
Why can't we do that tonight?
go across each application and say what is salary and what is not.
Salaries were or weren't.
I think we just build that into the contract. It's part of the motion. I don't know why we couldn't do that tonight. I don't know what restricts us from not being able to do
I
that
think they would
tonight.
ask what constitutes salary and what constitutes contract, employees. I mean,
And you've got federal law that stipulates that.
I also think it's a little disingenuous to change this as we're voting on it
Yeah.
after they've submitted for months through this entire park process.
That's where I am. I mean, we're at the point where we're voting on this. We've had a work session about this, and tonight all the wheels are coming off. And we're going to change everything about the park council now. And the recommendations that come from the committee now, we can go back and start all over again to do this. I struggle with both. This is happening right now after we've had the opportunity to talk about it. We've been talking about this one subject now on 30 minutes. You know what? Let's get done. Let's can this thing and put it away or vote and go on. Because we can continue to change this all night long. Something will come up, else will come up right after this. And I don't think we're making any progress.
Okay, well, I guess, I'll tell you,
May I just ask two quick questions? Off the top of your head, how many dollars of ticket sales do you anticipate? Or did you have this last year? Total, in all the shows, plays, whatever you want to call them.
I don't have that number off the top of my head. I could grab it, but, I mean.
I'm just curious. And the other one is how much in donations? I understand you've been working on it, you've been gearing up, and you're ready to go.
I
But
can
how
get that,
much?
I can get both of those numbers to you tomorrow.
You and I can talk tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay. I just asked a question of the mayor. I'm going to ask publicly of the council. Can we go through 6 items, one at a time? Or do we have to do a vote for the whole park tax? Clark, I agree with you. I understand. It's time that we move on. That's what I'm trying to help happen.
I think,
I'm not saying this is not worthy of our time.
I understand.
I'm just saying we are completely changing the rules the way we want to do this now that will affect all the grants that we have done tonight. Every one of them. That's all I'm saying. I don't think the time to come up, vote up or down is the time we rework this whole policy.
So then, in your mind, how do we treat the very first item that dealt with the Christmas program.
I would say we bring it up in the motion. We just tie it into the motion. So I have 3 items of the motion to be considered. And I think that we could, if somebody's comfortable with making the motion, we could move it forward with the motion.
Mayor, I'd be happy to do that.
Okay.
Are you guys done with me? I mean,
We're
should I?
done. Thanks, Reggie.
Thanks, Reggie. The 3 that I understand we're talking about is the Winter Festival.
Correct.
That was the discussion point. The Learning Center at the library, and then the, am I safe to say, $89,000 in administrative costs for TAF? Is that what,
Sorry, repeat that one more time, I apologize.
the 3 items that we've really kind of keyed on right here that are on the mayor's possibility to include or not include in a motion would be
Right.
the $13,200 for the Winter Festival that has been proposed to be included for the Winter Festival for Harrington, the $19,700 for the Learning Center at the library, and then $89,000 in administration dollars. Those are the 3, Mayor?
Correct, they are.
Okay.
So,
I can tell you where I stand on it. The one that I would remove is the $13,200 for the Harrington for the Winter Festival. The other 2 that I would, if I'm going to put a proposal or a motion together.
well, I think you're halfway there, so why don't you
Yeah,
just
yeah.
make it?
Just keep talking.
Well, then, Mayor, I would move, and I don't know where it's at, to adopt the ordinance approving the distribution of the fiscal year 2021-2022 park tax funds as presented, and allow the city administrator to enter, excuse me, not as presented, but with the,
Always change.
the change to removing the $13,200 from the Winter Festival to Harrington Center for the Arts, and lowering their amount to $134,300, and allow the city administrator to enter into disbursement contracts with terms substantially similar to those presented under the direction of the mayor.
Okay.
I'll second that motion.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on this motion?
My only comment is, I think we're leaving it hanging still. I think we need to have more discussion during the upcoming year, not affecting tonight.
Okay.
That's what I'm feeling and hearing.
All right, I will call for a vote. Councilmember Carroll.
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor.
Aye.
Councilmember Hunter.
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes.
Aye, and with a big thank you to the Park Tax Committee for struggling through all that you have done so far.
Great group. All right, Councilmember Shelton.
I'm going to vote nay, and I hope it doesn't come across as being negative to the park tax. I just want it on public record that there are just a few concerns I have here that I don't necessarily agree with, but there is a lot of good that's being done out there, and I wish we could have voted on each one individually, because that would have maybe helped clarify my overall position.
Okay. All right, thank you. We'll now move on to item number 3, review and action on a resolution approving an updated general fee schedule.
Oh,
Mayor, I only saw one change on here. Is that the only change, is the one in
Yeah.
red?
Just one change.
Okay.
And I did have a point that I wanted to bring up, and that is that it's for a fire marshal for an hourly fee. I've mentioned to the administrator and the mayor that I have some heartburn over some of the hourly fees because we as a city get to charge however long we want. And for me, I feel like I would like to have it just be a fee and not add another hourly fee.
Would it be fair, and I agree, I see attorneys, CPAs, it's kind of funny how that hourly fee goes, and it tends to be the less favorable of it, because you wonder the fiduciary duty there if they're making the most efficient use of time when you're paying it, right?
Right.
I much rather love project fees. I don't know if we can do an hourly fee, but when they come back and say, hey, our fire marshal, because I think a project fee is going to be different based upon
The size of the
the
project.
development, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how you price that in, but I would hope that we'd be able to say, hey, we charge $125 per hour, but this is the hours and scope of work, and that's what we hold it to. That way it allows the developer to look at a budget and hopefully know where that's going to be at. Does that
Yeah,
make
that seems
sense?
a lot more fair. Is that possible to
Well,
do
It's
though?
really difficult because each project has a different scope to it, right? And so this fee is similar to what we have for engineering review.
Right.
If we were to outsource this very thing, and we said, hey, we need to go hire somebody to do this, this is the fee that they would up, in fact, they would probably pay more. So it is the hourly, the total hourly, I don't know what the word is, allocation to the project. So if the project goes fast and everything's in order and the fire marshal has to look at a few things and check off the box, it's great. They'll move through very quickly. Of course, our fire marshal wants to go as quick as he can because he's really busy. He doesn't have time to be inefficient with his time. And so
I don't really think that's happening. I think it's more like from the side of a developer, how he sees the city, working with the city, and I'm sensitive to that, and I want to protect in some ways the city's, how they view the city. So if you had a scope, and they're like, this is the scope, and then they come back to you an additional time, in an engineering example, you would say, hey, just so you know, this is gonna be outside of your scope, so we're gonna be charging you more for this. I don't know administratively how difficult that would be to do, that's why I'm asking.
And we can give developers a standard, hey, typically it takes the fire marshal 3 hours to review a project. Now, if your project extends longer than that, or if it's more difficult, or if you bring that back through for an additional review, then it's $125 an hour.
And I think the problem is the expectation. When I've heard it from developers, it's, man, I keep getting these bills from the city and I don't even know what they're for. One, because they're not itemized. That's the biggest issue. And so they're going, what was this for? You spent 3 hours of work on there. You've got a great partner right here that charges an hourly service for her time. And usually when you get an attorney's bill, it kind of itemizes exactly what that's for. What I don't want to do is create a lot of work for staff to do that. But I think setting that expectation up front, and every professional, while it may take an ability to adapt to that new model, should be able to. I do that in my own line of work, right?
No, it is the expectation that staff will actually do that. So for instance, if there's a project that goes to planning commission, the fire marshal has to be there to take that project through and give comments on that, the expectation is there will be a line item there that says, planning commission or, project review, the exact hours that it took. Absolutely.
I'd love to see a sample of that, because the feedback I'm getting from developers is they're not seeing that. And that's not just the fire marshal, that's for all the engineering and all the other types of services that we charge, inspections that we outsource and things of that nature.
The difficulty we have here at a flat fee of $100, it really doesn't cover hardly any of the fire marshal's time to go do those reviews. It doesn't even come close. So really what's happening is the city is subsidizing development. That's what's happening right now.
And I just might add that, I see it a little bit on this side from the notion that if I'm working on a project in our line of work and it's a 1,200 square foot bakery on Main Street, it's going to be an entirely different review than a, 850,000 square foot tilt project along the lake shore or something, right? They're making that up, but two different projects that my personal firm happens to be working on, and the time that the fire marshal is going to have to spend on this one versus this one are entirely different. And so if we set some sort of maybe we could work towards something that was like, hey, the standard is 3 hours. Now, if you go above and beyond that, and so maybe the billing is such that, hey, we're billing you, and the initial fee was for $500. I don't know what it cost, but and then if you go above and beyond that, and you've got billings to show, hey, we took the first 2 hours of your $500 has been credited out, and the next one before the end of the project. Now, by the time I'm on review number 3, and we're at hour number 17 of this, you could easily you could easily get to quantify how I arrived at this fee. But maybe it's easy to say, okay, the typical size project is 3 hours worth or something. I don't know.
I just think it's the communication. That's the biggest issue that I see with developers, is just that expectation. And that's with every hourly fee that we charge through the development process. So if there was a way to better communicate that, I think that would be helpful.
I think having this per hour fee too does tend to incentivize developers to turn in good, clean plans. If not, I mean, it seems like is the fire marshal going to do it for them? And if that's the case, they're going to pay for it. We know of engineers that will do that. They come, here's the plans. It's very cut and dry. They've understood our code. They've abided by it. And then others just kind of throw stuff out there and see what sticks. Those kinds of groups, it's going to cost them more money because they didn't do their homework to get it there. So
maybe a suggestion would be that we move forward at this stage, but I'd be interested to see if there's a way to come up with a flat standard fee that then I don't know.
I would be supportive of that. Maybe we move forward now with the understanding that we consider hourly fees and if there's anything that can be done.
I do appreciate Councilman Shelton's the idea. If in fact that's the case, I haven't had anybody tell me that, but if there's a situation where somebody doesn't know what their billing is actually for, then clearly we need to do better and be able to identify, hey, this was, whatever, the OAC meeting on this date for this amount of time and it took 4 hours for the fire. Well, then clearly, yeah, that should be charged to them, but we should be able to quantify what that is. Yeah.
Okay.
So with that, Mayor, I would move to approve. Sorry, I'm on the wrong page.
There we go. It's out there.
All right. Move to adopt the resolution approving the updated general fee schedule.
I have a motion by Councilmember Hunter.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Taylor. Nice and clear there. I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Shelton.
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor.
Aye.
Councilmember Hunter.
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes.
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll.
I'm voting no on this one.
All right. Item number 4, review and action on approval of the city's fiscal year ending June 30th, 2022 tentative budget. Tentative, as you noticed, even in our earlier meetings with the RDA, the building authority, everything we do at this point is pretty tentative. State law would require it. We will come back in the coming months and fine tune it and codify it, I guess, in a way. So, is there any questions on the budget, the tentative budget?
Just to clarify, it's June 30, 2023.
You're right.
So in the motion, it's correct, but on that agenda, it says 2023.
As you can see, I just read what's in front of me, right from the common consent agenda to now. So, I knew that. Okay.
Just some comments that I have that would be helpful for me, and I think it's important to get these out up front. That way, we don't end up in a meeting down the road and people say, well, why didn't you bring this up beforehand? So, one thing I just would love to know is what got cut. So we based the discussions that we've had, especially around the general fund, on a 5 mil increase.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't really clear in here exactly what got cut
That's a
out
good
of
question.
it. So I'd love to know what got cut back from our presentations.
So our original discussions were the 5 mil, which would bring us about 1.7 million. We took direction from council last week at the work session to go at a lower rate, about $10 a month per household, which leaves us roughly 1.2 million. So 500,000 less than we originally proposed, which was cut directly from the road improvement program. So we originally suggested 4 million for the road improvement. We just took it down to 3.5.
All 500,000 came out of it.
Correct.
Which is an increase of how much from last year?
We generally budget about 2.1 to 2.5 million.
And so we're proposing a 3.5 on the,
Yes, we had some additional sales tax revenue, which helped bump the original budget up, but yes,
so
it's greater than last year.
1.4-ish,
Yes.
1.3, 1.4.
It's about 1 million more.
About $1 million bucks more.
And one thing I would love to have as a discussion, not that it has to be figured out tonight, is as we look at cuts, I just don't know if that's the highest priority that residents have said they would love to have that cut first. I wonder if there's other things inside the budget that we ought to take a look at to decrease and get that road funding back up to where it needs to be at. I'd love to see it there. I think if we did do a property tax increase, it would be great to be able to show that we are making a very good effort towards our road program. The other thing that I could use some help with, and I mentioned this back in the meeting we had on the capital improvement meeting, I think is the right term for it. But we talk about road improvement, then we talk about road maintenance. And I don't understand the difference between the two. So I need some help in being educated on what's the difference between those two items. I don't like that they're split out that way unless it's saying this is how much we're spending on. Maintenance to me is snow plows, right? A slurry treatment to me is not maintenance. To me, that's more on the road improvement projects because we allocate that in all of our marketing material we give to residents. So I think to help it be very clear for residents when we're talking about the drive quality of the road, I think that ought to be allocated to the road improvement fund. The other question that I have that I could use some help with is I'm very confused because we're doing a lot of reorganization in this year's budget. And I tried to follow all the footnotes and where things are going, but it'd be helpful to have an organizational chart that shows where things are going to be. And if I missed that and it was in there, I apologize. I did try to do my best to read through all of this in a timely manner, but the issues I have are more administrative and community. I can't remember all the new departments we're creating, to be honest with you. I think there's 3, if I counted it up right. But maybe I got that wrong.
There's
So
no new departments at all. They're all the same. All the departments are the same. It's where the divisions are within the department.
So maybe I ought to clarify that. I believe I counted Patrick's department as being new because that's not how we had it on last year's budget. So this year's budget would be a change in how we're allocating and looking at that. So when I go through, I'm just comparing from one year to the last because it was handled different when Adam and Bendeline were here. They left in November. We restructured, but
They weren't their own department.
Yeah, they were their own department.
correct. But when I guess, and maybe I'm talking different. You have a lot of shifting things going on, right? Between now moving building inspection underneath there, we're moving HR over here. We're moving a lot of things different places. And so again, I was trying to follow all the footnotes. I thought, you know what? In the past, inside the budget, we always had an organizational chart that showed where everything flows, who's reporting to who, and I think that would be helpful for me.
So this, when we bring back a final budget, all of that will be included along with department summaries, goals, and accomplishments. These are just the tentative numbers, and so when we finalize it, you'll have a lot more narrative, a lot more descriptions, an org chart.
Awesome.
All that
I just
will be
want that
included.
before the final budget.
Of
I'd
course.
love that in the next week so I can work on it and understand because we are putting quite a few extra FTEs into this year's budget, more than I think we have in any recent year that I can remember. And so for me to flow that and understand the need and who's reporting to who, that'd be helpful. The other question I had is I didn't see anything in there about the courts building and the rents. I would just love an update on where that's at. And if it's not in the budget, where are we at on that? I think we talked back in the retreat, that was a priority to try to get done as soon as possible. I think that's very important to have as part of the budget and as part of the tax increase cost is how we're going to help fund police departments going forward by adding that revenue component back into the budget. The other one was the fund balance. And Anna, maybe you could help me on this, and I apologize again. I'm trying to keep everything at. I thought we were about 32 million on the general fund. And are we 35% of that budget is the state mandated maximum that we could have? Is that?
So our general fund, our audited fund balance for general fund was 11,200,000.
And that's the max that we can have.
Correct.
And so when I looked at the budget, sorry, I'm still trying to find it. I'll get better organized here when I get.
There are
more
fund
time.
balance summaries on page 1 of the budget.
Well, I'm looking at packet page 65. I don't know what page, packet, or I guess page number 9 on the tentative budget. So I'm looking at the proposed budget and it's showing a 12.4 million fund balance ending. And if we can only have 11.2, where does that excess go to?
So our revenues increased, and the maximum we can have is 35% of our revenues, and so our fund balance then increased slightly.
So you're automatically increasing the fund balance to match
To-
what our
to
revenues
max
are
out
matching.
that
So we can
limit.
consistently, so we're not always, okay.
Not drawing it down.
We're not drawing it down, we're keeping the 35%.
Just have to run a new calculation. I'll do that on my own, but when I ran it, it seemed like that was more than what was allowed by 35% of the 31 seemed to be different. Does
I
that
can
make
take a
sense?
look at that and confirm.
Okay. And then the other question that I had was, and this is probably an item of discussion, been out there talking to people about trees and how big of an issue it really is for them. And then I've talked to them about code enforcement. And if I remember right, in the past, we approved 2 part-time positions to equal 1 full-time equivalent to have 2 people in code enforcement. Is that right? In the past?
We have a full-time code enforcement and then a part-time.
Gotcha. So when I looked at it here, it looked as if we only have one full-time that we have allocated in this budget. Did I see that wrong in the police side of things?
There should be both the full-time and the part-time still. That should not have changed.
And maybe it's not necessarily listed as code enforcement, it's listed as like animal control, and so I'm trying to figure out, okay, is that, I don't know how you split up those hours. But for me, as I've talked with people out there, and obviously it's my selected group that I've been, talking to as I reach out to people, code enforcement seems to be the biggest issue. Talked to a few people inside the police department, they also would agree that that is the issue. That when you actually look at the call logs, the complaints coming in, very few have to do with trees. And so I look at that and I say, okay, we got 250,000 allocated to the trees. I am really concerned about that, and I feel like that could go more towards code enforcement and help us meet the objectives I think our residents would want to have from a service level. So that's more of a comment that I'd love to just put on the record that I think we need to have more discussion about. And then last but not least, just the water fund. Had some questions on that. When we look at the expenses on the water fund, it looks like, I just apologize, trying to find it here quickly to be expedient on time. It seemed as if we're paying for the 36-inch water line out of our water fund, not the water impact fund. Is there a reason why that is?
We do both. There is the majority of the funding for that project is bond proceeds, which we put in our water fund. And so we're just drawing down those proceeds, but we do have an impact fee portion.
Yes, when I looked at it, I was just thinking, it looks like we had, I'm going off memory here, so forgive me, a big chunk, I think it was like 17 million last year, and then like 10 million this year for a total of 27 million. And then we had, that came out of the water fund, and I get that's bond proceeds coming in, coming out, it's just passing through, right? But then in the impact fee, we have 1.5 that's coming in and going out from bond proceeds. So when I look at it, my thought was a good majority of that 36-inch water pipeline was supposed to be paid for by impact fees. We're bonding for it, but future impact fees are paying for it back. So why are we passing that through the water fund and not the water impact fee fund?
So what happens when we pay the debt service, that will be allocated based on growth versus existing pipe. And so when we pay that debt service, it will come out of the impact fee throughout the life of the bond.
Okay, I get that. I just thought it was weird to me when I look at the budget, and again, I'm trying to look at it the eyes of a resident trying to understand it. If you told me that we're paying
Which
for
doesn't happen, just for the record.
I'll be honest with you, there's a select group that do look at it, and Brad and I have been in their houses and talked to them. We had,
I was being facetious, I apologize.
but when we look at it, to me, it looks like all that's coming out of the resident fund and not the impact fee, and I don't know if it matters to reallocate that on the budget. Does that make sense?
It does. The majority of the initial project costs are through bond proceeds, so we have to show that somewhere. It's just easier to put it in one fund. It's like you said, an in and out. But over the life of the bond, we'll take some from, again, impact fees, some, whichever portion talking to Public Works needs to be allocated from impact fees, we'll pay that debt service.
Yeah, I guess it'd just be cleaner from a transparency perspective to say, hey, out of this 30 million, you got 20 million that's going impact fee, run it through the impact fee, 10 million's going from, the current users to replace the 12-inch water line, put that through. I don't know if there's a right or wrong, other than just being very transparent so the public can be able to look at that and go, oh, yeah, that $30 million, that was not paid for by residents. That was going to be paid for by impact fee from future development costs.
Yeah, understood. Yeah, we track that very carefully. We make sure that's allocated
Is that
properly.
something we could put as a footnote in the budget or something like that?
Definitely.
For transparency, if we're not going to change how we allocate that? Because again, I would say that is a major complaint that I get, is why are current water users paying for the growth? And when you say you're not, and then they go to the budget and say, well, wait a second, that 36-inch pipeline, 90% of it came out of the resident's pocket, not out of impact fee. Not understanding that we're paying for that bond back through a different direction.
Okay. Good points. Is there any other? Again, this is tentative. I think, it gets pretty close. There's not a lot of movement in the past. We haven't had a lot of movement. So I would like to think that we need some consensus. If as far as the forester is concerned, I think it's something that we need a consensus on. That's a big ticket item as far as a change in the city. But I don't want to, again, this is a tentative budget, and we can work those other things out.
I do have comments about the forester, but since this is a tentative budget, I'm inclined to just pass it as a tentative budget unless the rest of the council wants to discuss it again. Only because we've discussed it multiple times, but I guess that's a question for y'all.
We have time to talk about what is tentative and what is going to be permanent. So,
Mayor, it sounds to me like there are some continued concerns about the forester. I personally like the idea of trying to get ahead of it for reasons where, the sidewalks in my neighborhood, for example, I recognize I live in a little bit older part of town. My house is, 50 some odd years old. So I recognize that, but both sides of my sidewalk need significant issues. The first way to start that is to fix the trees. Making sure somebody's watching on it. The enforcement side of that would be that forester, in my opinion, who's managing those things. And the notion that, and I think candidly, part of the concern for me is that if it's purely an enforcement thing, there are a list of a gazillion miles long of other items that can be enforced, none the least of which are chickens and roosters and or not roosters, or dogs running loose and all those other enforcement things. And so it does become backburnered. So now the neighborhoods we're putting in now in 50 years do look like my sidewalks. And so those are the kinds of things that, for me, I think it's actually beneficial, hopefully, that we try and approach that so that somebody is looking at what trees getting put in the lawn, and is this going to totally ruin the sidewalk in 20 years to where they are the best BMX race. I mean, I loved it as a 10-year-old, but the older I get, the less inclined I am to catch air because I typically fall on my face. But anyway, so this morning I was in a really great area of our city. It was a business area. The trees looked wonderful, and I know exactly what those trees will become. And they planted them really close together, and I thought, there is 2 blocks of sidewalk that is going to be blown. And we got to get ahead of it. So, and again, I guess that's my point. It
Yeah.
sounds like there are additional concerns, but to again, perhaps we add that as part of the next work session. I don't know what, Mayor, but I just, in the interest of the tentative budget, I would concur with Councilwoman Carroll that moving forward, allocating or reallocating, I don't think it's a change in a dollar amount so much as it potentially could be a change in allocation where it ends up in the budget, but not necessarily a bottom line change. Is that safe to say?
I think it'd just be good to have that discussion, had a lot of thoughts, and I think there's a lot of preventative stuff we could do as a city right now to stop it that would actually be more effective than a forester, but again, probably better to have that discussion at another time to have that. You know, I think, didn't we have our engineers go through and grade all of our sidewalk? Wasn't that part of the project that we had done?
Streets department, yeah.
Yes, Streets Department, look
Yeah.
at our sidewalks.
Yeah.
Do an inventory on areas that need repair.
Yeah, I was just joking, maybe with our communication department, we hold the worst road and worst sidewalk competition, so you can take the best photo of the worst one and then give them a worst photo. I don't know, I'm just joking, but it seems like there is a never-ending issue of infrastructure that needs to be taken care of, and I think that's the hardest thing about the budget is where does it prioritize, right? And how do you try to,
I just,
Tell
for
them.
me, the one comment that I would make at this period of time is that when you ask people if the trees are of concern, that I don't think anybody would identify it as a tree of concern. What the concern that we're trying to solve is, in my mind, twofold. One is the sidewalks, which we have heard repeatedly is a concern by people, and they have asked us to fix them. And number two is the liability issues that we have, which I think could cost the city a lot of money. So it's a forward-looking program. And that's all I'll say about it at this time.
With that, Mayor, may I make, or
No, you may not.
may not?
I've been sitting here all night.
Yes, we have.
I've got a long speech,
Oh, a long speech.
a long speech and very small.
He's written it down.
I have.
I looked at
Oh my
it. It's a
gosh.
good speech. I
The
just-
mayor knows what's coming. I'm going to pontificate a little bit.
Okay.
she's standing up.
She's ready.
Sorry, my back is starting to hurt a little.
If you'll go back and look at this document, in the very first section, there are a number of pages, just to prove that I did do it, that,
You got to speak right there for Councilman Taylor.
okay, sorry, Clark, Councilman Taylor. I went through,
Okay, Kev. Mayor, unfortunately, I have about 8 minutes. I'm 1 hour late to a client engagement, so I've got 8 minutes before I have to take off. So
I won't use the entire 8.
I'll probably take all of that.
Nope, I won't use the entire 8. Because I have OCD, no offense to others who do, I went through and I used highlighters every time somebody said something about our roads. Roads were pink. Almost every single page on this employee result said roads are their number one concern. We've heard this now for a number of years. So I am going to get excited. Like I said, I'm going to pontificate. You just said, if I heard it right, we just took $500,000 out of what was going to be a roads money instead of taking anything out of any other part of the budget. Is that correct?
Yes.
More or less. So, first point is I think we're not doing, why do we do a survey and not pay a little more attention to it? I could go on that, but I won't. Earlier this year, we approved, I'm going to put a couple of baskets out there. Earlier this year, we approved increases for police and fire. I'm all for it. We needed to do it. That took 2 mills, roughly, give or take. Put that in your little storage. I took the time to call and visit with approximately a dozen people. These were detailed conversations, several of which lasted nearly an hour. I asked them if we were to raise taxes as a city, would they be comfortable with $10? Every single person I asked said, yes, $10 is fine. Then I said, how about 15? Every single person but one said 15 is fine. Then I asked, how about 20? Almost every one of them said 20 is fine.
You're talking per month?
Per month,
Okay.
yes, thank you, Mayor. 10 or 15 or $20 per month. So you talk to people, I talk to people, they're different groups, we acknowledge that. I heard time and time again, they are still mad that we didn't spend or borrow $10 million, 8 years ago, let's say. These are, and I talk to people my age, and believe it, I found a couple that are older. I talked to some people with young kids as young as 2 years old and everywhere in between. Some of them remember the $10, some of them don't. People are concerned about the roads. That's the whole gist of what I'm talking about there. My result is people are willing to spend more than the $10 we're talking about. I realized we'd come down to that, and I'll get to the point eventually. I talked to an individual who used to work for an employer in this city, one of whom the employees was the mayor of this city. This former mayor told this employee more than once, years ago, the biggest regret he had from serving on the city council was quit kicking the can down the road. And he still feels that way after many years have gone by. Earlier this year, we had some conversation. I honestly felt we had 3 council members that were totally in favor of 3 mills. That was pre the last 2 months of inflation, and I understand that has changed the game as inflation. But guess what? The roads haven't changed. The need for the roads and the improvement has not changed at all in those 2 months. My understanding from current home prices, and I could be totally corrected on this, is right now home inflation is 25 or 30%, give or take. Pick a number in there somewhere. Because of truth in taxation and the things we have to do, I think that increase will eat up almost all of the 3%. I don't know the number because we don't know what the county's final number is going to be, but it's going to be close to the 3%. We're kicking the can. We're not leaving any extra money for the roads. So, bottom line is this. I'm going to vote against this budget because I don't think we're putting enough money into roads. I do not think we are increasing the mill levy enough. We could peg it, and that will help us. But I think we need to decide it needs to be pegged and or some combination of an increase or whatever, or otherwise we're kicking it down the road for another group. I think this is a year to do it because guess what? Alpine School District, as far as I know, isn't borrowing any money. We're not trying to renew the park tax, which I think was great to renew, and I agree it was fine to separate them. And none of the 5 of us have to worry about being elected again this year. So those 3 main reasons, as well as some others. I think we do something this year to really increase it. We skip next year because I don't want taxes to be the only issue that the people of this community think about in relation to our city government and how we operate. So I'm saying do a big one this year, skip next year, and then peg it, for example, from then on every year. So, is that a long enough pontification? Thank you, Mayor. Any questions?
I think that was just a good general statement and how you felt, council member. So, yeah. All right. Okay. With that being said, is there any other pontificating that needs to happen? So I was just kidding. So,
oh, that's fine. A new word for city council.
Yeah, let Clark say.
Go ahead, Clark.
I hate that there's a perception that this is based on re-election. I know, Kevin, that was just a point. You know, I'm going to live here long after I'm ever a city councilman. I think the integrity of our council is clear enough that as we make decisions, we make the very best decisions we can. I hope for the life of me, and I cannot see one person on this council that would do otherwise, that we're voting based on whether or not there's a re-election issue. So I know, Kevin, you just brought that up as a point of interest, that this year is the year to get it done. But I if I could strike that, I would. I just don't think we are to that point. But anyway.
I understand that, and I appreciate it. and I'm just saying it might make it a little easier. One thing that I didn't include was I did have a number of people who volunteered that they appreciate and understand what's going on with this city at this time, and they have total confidence in all of the elected officials and the administration. And that became very clear from a number of people, and those are people who are involved enough to know a little bit about what's going on. So, Clark, it's just kind of a little thing. Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
All right, would somebody like to make a motion on this item?
I would move to approve the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2023 proposed budget and set the public hearing for the final fiscal year ending June 30th, 2023 budget for Tuesday, June 21st, 2022 at 7 p.m.
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion by Councilmember Carroll, second by Councilmember Hunter. And I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Hunter?
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll?
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton?
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor?
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes?
As stated, I will vote no because I think it needs more discussion, and that's the only reason.
Okay, item number 5.
Mayor, just real quick, I just want,
If I could, I need excuse.
Okay. Thank you for participation. And,
Thank you all very much.
okay, for the record, Councilmember Taylor is no longer with us in this meeting.
it's quite the announcement. I'm just going to mention a big thank you to staff. I know a lot of work goes into these budgets, and I hope that the comments didn't come across in a way that didn't show any appreciation for the hard work that was put in so far.
I'll second that one.
Okay. All right, item number 5, review and action on a resolution approving an update to the parks element of the American Fork General Plan. If you remember right, it's been a few years that we actually met with the parks, and this is the Parks and Trails Committee, and they've done a wonderful job at preparing this, and it's been through the Planning Commission and is before us now.
You don't mean to open up another whole can of worms. I love this here. What I took away from that meeting is we didn't keep up enough with our standard of service level in the number of acreage, and so it kind of shrunk down as far as impact fees and what we can charge are concerned. Is that right?
I don't know if it's there yet. Camden's the best one to describe that, but it certainly has the possibility. Camden.
Yeah, park impact fees are done a little differently than the other impact fees, whereas to the streets or other ones, you kind of project forward, whereas park impact fees, you kind of audit what you currently have, and then that determines the rate, so that if you don't acquire land or add amenities exactly at the rate that's already predetermined, you do something less than that, then the next time you review impact fees, you're going to go out and do the lower amount. And so in that sense, it's hard since you can't just nail it every fiscal year, get everything you need. You kind of do it in chunks. It's hard to really hit that rate. And so yeah, it does go down in that sense.
And the one thing that I heard from the park tax committee they presented last work session is it's their opinion that park tax shouldn't be used for acquiring land, which to me kind of a bell went off in my head and said, well, wait a second, then that's going to be general fund money that we're going to have to use to purchase that land if we ever want to get.
Or impact fees, yeah.
Yes, but if you pay the impact fee, that's to maintain your current ratio, right? So as you do that calculation, whatever you're collecting is allowing you on that new growth to keep that same, so to keep the equation the same.
Yeah.
So if you're only buying from impact fees, all you're doing is keeping the equation the same. You're never increasing it, unless you're putting in other dollars from other areas,
Yeah,
right?
that's correct.
So my point being is if we're going to try to get back up to that service level, because I think right now we're at 4.54, but our goal is to get to 5, then we've got to have money coming in from other areas other than park impact fees. So that's where I would come back. And again, I don't know if as a council, we give that direction to the park tax committee to allow them to consider at least partial use of park tax funds for the purchase of land to get us back up to that goal that we have. Otherwise, it's going to have to come out of the general fund. I didn't see that really discussed in here about how to get that back up to 5. We say, hey, here's the actual and here's what we're going to adopt as 5. So I think that's the discussion we need to have. And again, we're looking at budgets and debating over everything, and we ought to have something in there. Or I guess a donation of land would help get us at that point. So I love the plan that says, hey, here's where we're at, here we need to go. I think the part that's missing is how we're going to execute to get from point A to point B.
You know, when that was said, as far as, you know, a general feeling of how that committee felt, I thought, well, they're already paying for part of our time, you know.
And
I know.
that was the comment, I appreciate you bringing that up, Mayor, because that was the comment that I was going to bring up, is as we transition out of that bond over, what, 5 years? I can't remember exactly.
It was a short one.
Whatever it is, a few years out, if we were to take those funds, and I actually agree that it's interesting that we wouldn't include that. Other cities actually use it specifically. Again,
For
going
that.
back to my career, we're currently working on one in a neighboring city where the funding for that is 100% from their newly approved, newly approved park.
Park
or whatever
tax
they call it.
situation.
Yeah, park
Okay,
tax. They're,
just making
yeah.
sure.
So they are acquiring land with that.
With that.
But let me restate that. My understanding is that they are. I guess I shouldn't speak on behalf of them, but my understanding is that they are. But I also think perhaps when the Park Tax Committee was founded, it's been 10 years now, we're close to that, something. The city has changed significantly. If you think about just on the south side of town, the ability to acquire ground is probably different now than, or the need to acquire maybe is the right phrasing. But I do like the idea of possibly retaining those funds that, you know, I also don't want to necessarily do it at the expense of, okay, Harrington, no money this year, hypothetically, of course, but, you know, that kind of a thing. I use them as a special year. So
I chased him out.
yeah, okay. You ran off. But anyway, I think it's certainly valid to consider, but I also recognize that we've got a pretty significant amount of money that's kind of coming, at least I see it coming down the line, that could be utilized for that acquisition. But currently it's against the rules for park, then maybe we do need to consider that.
Well, I think we have to look at how we're developing and how quick we are down there. So if we wait
Yeah, if
for
we wait
that
5 years.
bond to be done, and then, you know, do we not have any land to be able to purchase down there? So I don't feel like, I didn't go back and look at it, but from memory, I don't remember us ever giving direction that we couldn't do
No,
that.
that was just their
And so I feel like we need
yeah.
to give some maybe clarification and say, no, this is it. Because even with our guy, we came back and said, no, we are bonding, this is what we're doing, because this is a need we see. So when I looked at this, I looked at that park tax fund as probably being the best way to bridge that gap from point A to point B, from 4.54 to 5, and get that ratio. And then I would love to then go out, redo our impact fee analysis, and it would match our plan to where that equation is now the same. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's just a matter of giving a little direction.
I will say, I will add it. I just wanted to say that we did just spend a huge amount of money buying a massive park down there. So while I know it's not hitting that, and the numbers reflect that, we did spend an enormous amount of money just recently to do that, so, or allocated, you know, however you call it.
You know, I'm just going to ask this, Camden, and this is so I don't forget, and you can think, maybe run this, because it's not just, it's even upgrades, but does the boat harbor count in, at least in theory, to parks, just to open space? We're gonna be spending some, you know, some grant money there this year. I thought I'd bring it up.
Yes and no. I mean, we do count it as part of our collective recreational opportunities, and it's on the list when you look at the inventory that we have. But when we try and lock in what we consider our level of service, we have focused on core, I think is what the term that's used in there, park space, and that's really just a very traditional active use space, landscapes, grass, programming, and so we have special use space separate from that. And that could be open space, that could be the boat harbor, that could be wetlands,
That could be a monarch butterfly refuge.
And it is. That's part of it. It's listed on there too right now, that area. I think it's just wetland specified. So yeah, we do have as part of the overall mix, but when we look at our level of service, we're just looking at core traditional active park space, which wouldn't include the Bow Harbor.
Okay. Was that just a decision that was made? Why do we do it that way?
I mean, it is a carryover from how the general plan was the last iteration, but you do kind of have to, it's up to each city to define that, and we know that that's a big priority. We often see that these other special uses have varying degrees of activity in them and benefits to the city, and so we try to focus on kind of the basic ones that most residents are requesting and demanding and measure that, knowing that these other ones kind of come to us often. And so every city makes the choice of how they want to measure that. And if we want to change it, we can moving forward and look at it differently. And so it's up to you guys.
Does that allow us to increase our impact fee if we do it that way?
No, the impact fee is calculated similarly to the core space, where they look at the specific amenities identified in those core spaces and the acreage in those spaces as well.
And I hope that doesn't come across critical the whole time. I'm glad they did the update, well needed, a lot of time put into it, appreciate that. Just last meeting and this one, in my mind, I see park tax helping us get back to that ratio, and I think that's a huge tool that we gotta keep at the forefront and just make sure everyone, if the council feels that way, everyone, committee, park tax and park committee are on board with that.
For sure.
Not that it matters, but on the map that's included with our packet, it does show the boat harbor as a current park, just as Rotary or any other park would be.
Yep.
They're all red, that's all I'm saying. It is counted as a park.
Yep.
Just not towards that graph.
But not towards, yeah. The other comment I want to make, not for discussion now, but at some point. Park level service comparison, city comparisons is on page 167 of the packet. And it shows a graph there. I don't want to be misunderstood, so I'm going to say right up front, I'm not opposed to parks or any of the other things. But if you put that up there, nobody else has adopted the number that we have. We're showing 6.25. If I'm reading that correct, if I'm not, correct me. But we are showing 6.25, and the closest one I can see is 4.5. Am I misreading that graph, one of you smart people?
Yeah, the previous general plan for our parks was 6.25. And so this new one would change that number. Maybe we should specify that in there, that
this was a prior.
This one. Another thing to note, as we're talking about, I said that every city has the ability to define their
and they define
level
it
of service
right.
differently. This one's a very manual data set that we had to calculate, because you do have other cities that have said that their level of service is 10 acres per 1,000 residents, but then when you go dig
look at
into
what
that, they're including trailheads and completely
all
different
kinds of
plan and other stuff. And so I had to go for these cities and back those out and look at the same park space that we are measuring as a comparison. And so just understand that that had to be done manually on our end.
And thanks for doing that, and thanks for that explanation. My only point here is we're pretty close to the top.
Yeah, and that was
not saying it's good or bad or otherwise. That's the decision we make.
Yeah,
and people need to understand that. That's part of what makes American Fork American Fork. It's these little, quote unquote, little decisions we make to do things that we often get criticized for or some other situation.
Well, I don't think anything that I've heard tonight would preclude us from adopting this, so I would entertain a motion.
I can make it, but I'm lost.
I'll make a motion. move to adopt the resolution approving an update to the parks element of the American Fork General Plan with some gratitude towards Camden and the committee, because I know that we demanded that of them. So thank you.
Okay.
I'll second it, Mayor.
We have a motion by Councilmember Carroll, second by Councilmember Barnes, and I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Hunter?
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll?
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton?
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes?
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor is absent. Okay. Item number 6, review and action on resolution approving a land use map amendment from the residential medium density designation to the general commercial designation located at 355 East, 200 South. Thank you,
Mayor.
Patrick.
So this item and the next item are paired together. The applicant is here if you've got any questions, but it is essentially just in response to the applicant trying to change the use of their property from a home daycare use to a commercial daycare use. It would be an extension of an existing zoning boundary south. From a staff perspective, due to 200 South being located south of their property, that would be that boundary that we wouldn't envisage any further movement of that of the zone they're looking to move to, being the GC1 zone, going any further than that property. The applicant is anticipating or is hoping at some point to buy adjacent property as well, just to extend their potential business. This would be their first step, and they understand that if a land use amendment and zone change was approved, they still would have to go through a site plan process.
Okay.
I'm just going to try and move this along, if I may. I drove by there today. I think it's a great idea. I think it's a great location. So I'm going to suggest a motion to move to adopt the resolution approving a land use map amendment from the residential medium density designation to the general commercial designation located at 355 East, 200 South.
We have a motion by Councilmember Barnes,
Second.
second by Councilmember Carroll. I'll call for a vote.
The only question I have on this, sorry, just
Okay.
discussion real quick, is on that lot, it seems like it's a flag lot, right? And I've
That's
often
correct, yeah.
heard that the issue with the flag lot is our public safety, being able to get back there to be able to respond. Just have a concern that, is that a concern with it going from a residential use to a commercial use, particularly like a daycare? Does our public safety have any issue with that flag lot?
When we were going through all of this, we spoke with the applicant early on to make sure that there wouldn't be issues if it was approved at land use amendment and a zone change, and then it got denied on some technicality from a staff or code perspective. So we went through all of that. Fire marshal's happy with access requirement. Engineering has outlined a couple of things that would need to be done as a part of that. We already have the plans for the site plan. If this was able to move forward, that we would be trying to cut down on review time frame as well.
And does it have enough frontage to be able to be approved as a lot of record? That's my biggest concern, is I think it's not a lot of record. I don't think it conforms with our code for the frontage needed for a G, what are we approving it to a GC1? And so my worry is if we go ahead and approve this to a GC1 and they don't have the right frontage, I don't know if we can do that outside of the code. So I don't know what that frontage is. I didn't see the exact marking, so I just wanted to bring that up as one of my concerns.
Right.
And I'm trying to remember conversations that I had with the applicant. This has been months ago now, but
That's part of the idea of trying to buy that adjacent property.
the
that's
adjacent
on the
property,
west
I
of it.
think, gave them
It's
to
to
the
the west.
east.
It's to
To
the
the
east.
east.
Sorry. Yep.
And so that, but again, I have no idea if that meets that code that Councilman Shelton's referring to, but I think that was kind of the anticipated hope, would be that, you'd need additional access. Now, again, I haven't seen anything other than,
So I guess my question is if we go ahead and approve this tonight, are they able to go ahead and operate right in the GC1? I know a site plan's forthcoming, but at what point do we address that? Is that now, is that later down the road? Because they haven't acquired the property. I would assume that they would acquire the property and have to do a site, plat amendment
Yeah.
showing that as one joint property. So those are the questions I have just from a procedural standpoint.
Okay.
Just real quick, Councilmember, we were just looking at our city code here, and under the GC 1 code, which is 17.4.
17.4.402, subsection C, lot area, lot width, and building location. There shall be no minimum lot area or width requirements except that an area sufficient to accommodate the structure, landscaped areas, minimum setback requirements, so on and so forth.
Which is probably why we haven't brought it up on the staff review. So
You're like that.
I had a little bit of panic.
I saw it in your eyes.
I'm going to get Chief Brems up here to get the heart pumping again. But, yeah.
Fifth. Yeah. Did you
Okay.
guys see it? I saw it.
That was awesome.
That's good.
I
Patrick.
love it because it's the first
not
time
the-
you've been stumped.
No, it's not. It's not the first
Yeah.
time Councilman
Love it.
Shelton's caught me like that. But
Well,
yeah.
I apologize, I didn't have time to research, to be honest with you. I was digging in budgets, so that was the only thing that just came to mind as I was looking at this, so.
I
as
was
long as-
prepared to measure on Google Maps, but never
You know,
mind.
that's my biggest concern with the flag lot. I would love if they could, you said the developers here?
The applicant's back here. Yep.
Oh, there you are.
No, I was hoping he was our new employee.
Yeah. I would just suggest and ask that if we could get that to be bigger. I'm just often wondering, you get a fire truck and an ambulance call that needs to get back in there. I don't know how they get back in there from public safety. And so flag lots, even though the Board of Adjustments hasn't met in 3 years, I'm really glad, because that's usually what all the problems line up is in Board of Adjustments. I can think of Fred England's property and a few others that were flag lots that were created for whatever reason, and they're just difficult to deal with from a public
Sure.
safety standpoint, so.
And I think one of the things we had discussed previously was that they are going to try and get an access easement or agreement with the property to the north of it.
Okay.
That would allow them.
Is there a limit on how many kids they can have in that daycare?
I think that's determined by the occupancy load, and that's something that the fire marshal and
Okay.
building
That's just my
department
biggest
would
concern.
be
I can
addressing.
answer that question if you want. So, under its current structure, it would be 50 kids. And then if we get a permit and change the garage, it can get up to, I think, 62.
Okay. And I guess with that very vague definition of how we determine lot width, I would love to know how the staff comes to that determination on safety. So I'm okay moving forward with this now, but as far as a building permit and future expansion and site plan approval, those are questions that I want to make sure that we have addressed, because if you got 62 kids back there, and you got a fire building, you got a fire truck pulling into a narrow driveway, and that, I don't know, I don't see that being a great situation.
Looks a lot like this property over here on First East with 97 units on a half acre.
Okay.
Please strike that.
Is there?
This is not court. You don't get a strike here.
Whatever.
Oh, I do have a motion in a second. Okay, sorry. It's getting late, and I have not had dinner, so, okay.
I had a cookie a minute ago. You want the rest of mine?
I'm good. All right, I had a motion in a second. I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Hunter?
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton?
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll?
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes?
Aye.
Okay, so we can move 7 right along. If we're comfortable with 6, we're comfortable with 7, so.
Oh, I missed it.
I'm
I have
working.
a motion. I move to adopt the ordinance approving a zone map amendment from the R2 7500 residential zone to the GC1 general commercial zone located at 355 East, 200 South.
Okay, I have a motion by Councilmember Carroll,
Second.
second by Councilmember Shelton. I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Hunter?
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll?
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes?
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton?
Aye.
Okay, item 8A. Boy, we have all kinds of fun tonight.
I know.
We're getting a CRA, and we're moving forward our fire station, hopefully. Knock on, here's some wood. Okay, 8A, review and action on approval of the final plat for American Fork Fire Station, number 52, located in the area of 975 East Harvey Boulevard in the public facility PF zone. So, just a little overview.
Sure. So this met all of the requirements of just the staff review from fire engineering and planning, just for the final plat. just in relation, do you want me to move on to the site plan part of it as well and just give you?
Sure.
Okay, so part of this will be new Station 5-2 that will serve our northern part of the city and adjacent community with Cedar Hills. It will accommodate, I believe, another battalion. We'll house some of our some fire staff. We'll also, the site plan also outlines that there will be some police department interview space, and it will also include a training facility for PD. The final plat would have consolidated a number of just existing parcels that were there just into one parcel, so we can move forward on the site plan.
Right.
Just want to make sure there's no nepotism going on here between the approval of something for the city by the city.
Well, I just say this.
That's a joke, people.
We'll make sure that.
I don't care, leave it in there.
That the fire marshal marks his time on this and turns out the bill. So. All right. So any other questions?
Just question I have is, on the site plan, I'm just trying to understand it better. Is there access to the fire station off 1750 North?
On both sides, yeah.
Okay, and so where does that access, okay. I see. And it looks like area to be dedicated to American Fork City is in the hatch there. Is that to increase the road width?
Which part?
Yeah. And does that go all the way across through to the intersection on North County Boulevard? Or is it just gonna be weird to, well, I know we don't own the corner, but we as a city get to define what the right of way is, so when they annex into the city, we get to take whatever that right of way is. So I just wanna make sure it's gonna match. And we're not gonna have this weird bowling that's going to happen.
It will match in the future
Okay.
when that annexation occurs.
So the other thing that I have is the same thing on the south side. You've got Harvey Boulevard, and that road isn't to full width either.
It's already constructed.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
Okay.
UDOT.
I guess when I looked at,
This is driveway approach, it's already there.
gotcha. I was going to say let's just do approaches and then when they actually widen that width. But that is fully constructed to the full width of what the road's going to be. Okay, thank you. And then last question on the site plan. We talked about moving our evidence building at one point up to this location because we had more land. And eventually that evidence location we currently have would be utilized better by Public Works on their land. Is that going to be part of the site plan?
No, that's.
Okay.
That'll be a future phase.
There's still additional city-owned land adjacent to this that isn't.
Property there to be able to do that and move the burn facility up there as well?
I'm not sure we've talked about the burn facility yet. That'd have to be another discussion.
I'll tell you, they can burn all they want over there, and I live next to it, and I don't even know they're there. It seems like this might be kind of a real visible place to hold training for a burn facility.
Or maybe on the south side of town. I just noticed we talked about Public Works and maxing out space. It seems like police and fire have taken over the Public Works complex to a certain extent. We talked about having that.
You guys always reach over the lines.
Chief's got a comment or a question, I think.
I was just gonna say, the plan is to move it to 5-3 eventually,
Okay.
because 5-2 would not be a good location, so.
And part of that goes back to commitments made to me by previous administrations that once we got that salt dome built, all that construction material that our guy would move out and go down to where the burn facility is currently. And so I really do feel like we've got to find a home for that excess. So it'd be nice if we kind of got spots built for public safety where we kind of hash it together. And now hopefully Public Works can start bringing all of their stuff back to their home base as well, especially with the one we just bought.
Okay. If there's no other questions, I would entertain a motion to this.
To deny?
No.
Oh, I just wanted to see if Chief died back there.
Yeah,
He
you
won't.
got the
He
same
won't.
look
He won't
back.
give the same look.
Yeah,
as that.
He stood up like he was headed this way. It was just a joke, Chief. It was a joke. We're 3 years in the making here. Mayor, if I could, I would move to approve the final plat of American Fork Fire Station number 5-2, located in the area of 975 East Harvey Boulevard, in the public facility zone and authorize the mayor and council to sign the plat and accept the dedications with instructions to the city recorder to withhold recording of the plat, subject to all conditions identified in the public record associated with the April 20th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting.
Okay, I have a motion by Councilmember Hunter,
Second.
second by Councilmember Barnes, and I will call for a vote. Councilmember Barnes,
Aye.
Councilmember Hunter,
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll,
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton.
Aye.
Okay, item number 8B, review and action on an ordinance approving the site plan for Station 5-2 located in the area of 975 East Harvey Boulevard in the PF zone.
I'll move to adopt the ordinance, approving the site plan for Station 5-2 located at 975 East Harvey Boulevard in the public facility zone with instructions to the city recorder to withhold publication of the ordinance subject to all conditions identified in the public record of the May 4th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting.
Okay, motion by Councilmember Shelton,
I'll second.
second by Councilmember Carroll, and I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Carroll,
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton,
Aye.
Councilmember Hunter,
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes.
Aye.
Item number 9, review and action on an ordinance amending section 15.01.1525 of the American Fork City Code titled 620 South/700 South Road Crossway cross section. Rebecca, now that you had a good drink, we'll bring you up.
I figured it was important to do that before I stood up so that I wouldn't need it while I was up here. So this amendment is simply to remove the concrete curb section between the bike lane and the travel lane on this roadway section. Right now, the section shows a 2-foot concrete curb on both sides. So there have been some concerns and various issues with fire and safety, and so we wanted to look at some options for that. And
So as I looked at it, is it just that cross section?
yes,
Because this is how crazy I am. On date night with my wife, we went and drove all down around there. And what I loved about the development in whole, the TOD, is what we had a segregated bike lane. It was a green cement on the raised curb. That makes sense? And then the only place, all of a sudden, we transitioned to this weird thing, right? And I'm glad for it. I think we're gonna have better from storm drain issues and things of that nature that's gonna cause. So by removing that curb, I almost feel like we ought to keep it the same and consistent feel all the way down there, where you put the curb, but you have the cement and the green all the way across. Does that make sense?
so with the raised, the bike lane being raised, like
Yeah,
it
if you
is
go
in the
through
other
and you drive
areas?
through, I mean, gosh, it's all over down there, and you've got it north, south, east, west roads doing all the same thing. So if we are going to do a bike lane down there, why not keep it consistent with everything? Now, I went down there and I looked at the roundabout on 900 West and 600 South, and it transitioned. There's no curb that's there now, but inside the roundabout, it has the raised green, what am I looking for? Bike lane that goes all the way around there. So we would have had a transition at some point. So versus just having a bike lane that's all the way down there, why not make it look like it was intended to be that way all the way through? And then you also have the same thing when you transition over to, I'm using rough addresses here because this is off of the county, but 6650 West, which, what's that gonna be, about 700 West maybe, somewhere in there. It transitions back to that curb, so we have it on both ends. We already have it constructed on both ends. And so we gotta remove it from both ends and decide what we're going to do at that point. Does that make sense?
So we don't have to go through a long, arduous list, go through all these numbers again. I'm sorry, we've done this before.
Good.
I know about die when you see a cross
But if we have to, we will.
So I think Rob's just saying keep it the same, only keep that a raised curb. Is that right?
Well, if I heard it right, you're asking to raise the bike lane to match the curb.
Yeah,
Right,
so
that's
to
what I
move the
mean.
curb and gutter in and have the bike lane at a,
Just match everything else
Raised.
that's down there. I mean, if you drive down there, it's very clear. You see the green bike lanes, it's raised, and you have this median of landscaping median, and then you have the walkway, and it's all through down there that same way. Why we transition just on 620 South to this weird thing, which I'm glad we're getting rid of, but then I'm going, okay, are we just gonna remove that curb and now we're just gonna have a straight bike lane that's going to be there? It looks weird, and then when you go to that roundabout that's already constructed, you're gonna have to transition from a bike lane back onto the raised curb, back down. I just don't know why we don't keep it consistent all the way through. And then when you get further east, I can't remember the exact street, it transitions, it's already built, but it transitions back to that green curb again. And I'm like, well,
Yeah, I'm in favor of that, other than, is there a reason? I can't remember. Does anybody remember if there's a reason why we did it differently here in particular?
I'm concerned where if you go to that raised section, I know there was issues with fire trucks being able to get across when they put their outriggers out, if there was a fire there. And so if we don't have that width, and we're saying, okay, we're just gonna put the curb here and raise the bike lane up and paint it, if I'm hearing you correctly, that is the concern, is that an outrigger for a fire truck, for example, can't even get over that curb. So we need this width to be able to place the outrigger.
What did we do on the
you
other
need,
roads?
you need 20 feet?
To be able to put the outriggers out on both sides.
Why, you don't have a 20-foot asphalt? I don't
I'm
know.
just going off what the discussion has been, is that the outrigger does not clear a curb if it's that close to the roadway.
Yeah, that's
So-
correct. So we need 26 feet of asphalt.
Richard got 28 there, right?
Yes, but there's no,
Two
so
feet
if
of
we're,
curb or the gutter, so you actually got.
Chief, come on up.
Well, you wouldn't have all
You
this.
can't have all 2 feet.
Because you're
because
just
you have a-
basically moving this to here and raising this up, if I understood correctly.
But you still have a gutter, so this
Well, yeah,
2-foot gutter
yeah,
here
so this
is
gutter
gonna
comes
be.
right here.
Right, so you
Oh,
get,
gosh.
so that's
Oh, I thought I did
exactly.
something. I'm like, crap, I ruined it.
So are you recommending keeping it? Is that
So-
what I'm
I
hearing?
think
Sorry.
we're saying keep all the numbers the same. It's just keep raising the bike lane.
Just match what you have
That's what
down
I
there.
heard.
All your other roads are exactly the same, and this is a good example of it, where you have the green, and some of them, this one poured
Yeah,
cement
so-
between the bushes, which I thought was interesting. That's a great landscaping that we
Bushes.
did
That-
there.
That's a
good looking bush.
Probably one of
So
the trees
that
gonna-
cross-section's fine. What we have a
You can see
concern
it
with
almost-
is what's down there now, the
Right.
raised. And that's what Councilman Hunter's talking about. When we're responding, no one has room to merge over because of that bike lane, to get out of our way, because now we're coming to oncoming traffic. But then also that current cross-section with the height of that curb, when our outriggers come out, it won't clear it.
Okay,
I don't
so-
think I don't think we're talking
Yeah.
about that at all. We're
So-
talking about these numbers and just keeping the bike,
Yeah,
making the
and
bike
just
lane a
eliminate the
sidewalk.
bike, yeah.
So your typical travel lane is, this
It's
is
11.
14 feet that we got in a travel lane right here. Usually we're doing 11. I mean,
Right.
you have more room here for your outrigger than on a typical city street.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The one you showed is fine. Moving the sidewalk or the bike lane off the road.
So what we
Yeah,
need to do
we're all
is
agreeing,
move
we're
the
all
curb
saying the
and
same
gutter.
thing.
We would need to move the curb and gutter section out. That has to be, if we're gonna raise the bike lane, we need the curb and gutter there to collect all the drainage. So we'd actually move the curb and gutter out to where the buffer lines exist, right?
But then we don't need, oh, yeah, you're right. And
But then
we
the
don't
bike
need-
lane would shift to the other side.
So
It's almost the same.
Almost the same.
Okay.
your numbers all stay exactly the same.
Yeah.
Using
And we're-
the safety from.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't, yeah. Whatever you guys want to do, whether it's on the other side or whatever. We just had a problem with the concrete raised. So, what,
The travel lane.
This is a minor collector road.
Yeah.
Faster road.
My recommendation would be to bring you back another cross-section for you to approve.
Make sure we're looking at
Just
the
to
same
make sure
thing.
we're all together on
Yeah,
this.
if that picture that you pulled up is depicting this, and Chief's okay with it, and cars can get out of the way, and we can maintain it, we're not trying to plow a 4-foot wide bike lane with snow and such, that's totally different. I'm fine with it. That's the recollection I had, was if you can clear the,
So is that a minor collector right there?
that's what I don't know.
I was looking for the. So, yeah, we're completely fine with that.
Well, that's because Highland zip code is ours. We borrow Highland zip code.
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna just move to table this. I'm
Thank you.
getting a little tired.
Just
I'll
one-
second, yeah.
Can you pull that
Okay.
picture up real quick, Ken? I just want to make a comment, though. When we talked about some kind of a landscaping put in there, I mean, you look at the concrete that's in there. Some people did come in and pour the concrete in between. I don't know if that's what we were anticipating from landscaping. Be interesting to be able to take a look at that and say, okay, I don't really get that.
You're talking here?
Yeah. You can see,
Like-
and when you go down there, you'll see
This is
other
sidewalk,
sections. This is all landscaping zone right here.
Sidewalk,
So
landscape.
other places have bark all where that asphalt or that concrete is at, but it's interesting to know. But anyway.
Okay, I have a
Stop it
motion
down
to
there.
table,
I second.
and we have a second. I'll call for a vote. Let's see. Let me think. Okay. Councilmember Barnes, to table.
Yes, aye. Si,
Councilmember
senor.
Carroll.
Aye.
Councilmember Hunter.
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton.
Aye.
Okay. Item number 10, we're not going to be discussing. I pulled that. We noted that this morning with a text. Item number 11, review and action on a resolution approving the 2022 MAG pre-disaster mitigation plan. This has been something that's been worked on for a very long time as well.
Mayor, I had a chance to read through it. I didn't see any issues. It's glad that the community's coming together and doing planning, and it seems like we had great representation from our city there, so I feel comfortable moving forward to approve the resolution adopting the 2022 Mountain Land Pre-Disaster Hazard Mitigation Plan.
Okay, have a motion by Councilmember Shelton,
I'll second.
second by Councilmember Carroll, and I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Hunter,
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton,
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll,
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes.
Aye.
Item number 12, review and action on acceptance of a proposal for bond counsel services. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. David could go into more detail on how we picked and who we picked, but I think it tells the story here.
Just out of curiosity, how quick can we turn these bonds?
We will meet immediately after, if the council approves this, with the bond council to find out when we can come back with a parameters resolution and then start working on that process to get into the market.
Just can't stress enough, the bond market's nuts. I mean, it's crazy right now, and so I was talking to Lehigh's mayor, and on their fiber project, they broke it into 2 draws, and he said, we're actually gonna draw right away, even though we're not gonna use that money for a while, just to get those rates locked in right now. So I would suggest, we're looking at 1 to 1.5% rates by the end of the year.
Just a note, this is, the firm is Johnson, Patterson, and Yellow Horse. So it's just one Johnson.
Pharmaceutical
Yeah, that's what
company.
I was thinking.
Okay. All right.
Mayor,
I
I'd-
just said it out loud.
are we good to make a motion?
Yep, you bet.
Mayor, I'd move to accept the proposal from Johnson, Patterson, and Yellow Horse and authorize staff to execute agreements for bond counsel services.
Have a motion by Councilmember Hunter,
Second.
second by Councilmember Barnes, and I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Shelton,
Aye.
Councilmember Hunter,
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes,
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll.
Aye.
Okay, item number 13, review and action on a resolution approving a public infrastructure PID policy. This, nothing has changed from our work session. Of substance, it's pretty much the same way we talked about it, discussed and read it in, from our last work session.
I'm just having deja vu. I thought we passed this one, but maybe we didn't.
Work session.
Deja vu.
Mayor, if I could, I'd move to approve the resolution adopting American Fork Public Infrastructure Policy, PID policy.
Okay, I have a motion by Councilmember Hunter,
Second.
second by Councilmember Shelton. I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Carroll.
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton.
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes.
Aye.
Councilmember Hunter.
Aye.
Okay, item number 14, motion to adjourn. Motion by Councilmember Shelton,
Second?
second by Councilmember Hunter. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, council.